Chapter 15-16. Division Leader Wang and Deacon Sun had both reached the first tier of the Tribulation Transcendence realm. Ji Tianqing was caught off guard by the sudden attack of the two. Division Leader Wang waved his saber and slashed out dozens of flaming blades, which shrouded Ji Tianqing's figure, preventing him from dodging. Deacon Sun's bronze crossbow was a supreme-grade Essence Soul Realm Dharma treasure. It was extremely powerful. The icy blue arrow shot out from the bronze crossbow was only 3 feet long. It was crystal clear and contained an extremely cold aura. The power of this arrow was extraordinary. It was enough to penetrate the Dharma body of a 9th-level Essence Soul Realm expert and destroy his Essence Soul Dharma idol. The most important thing was that the tiny arrows were not conspicuous in the sky full of flames. They were very well hidden. Ji Tianqing was about to use his sword to block the slash of the saber radiance when the icy blue arrow shot in front of him and was about to pierce his heart. At this critical moment, he suddenly felt a cold aura invading his body. It was as if his entire body was about to freeze. He reacted almost instinctively and immediately spread his golden wings to protect himself. Clang! The golden rock's wings had just closed when the icy blue arrow pierced the golden wings. There was a crisp sound of metal clashing. The icy blue arrow instantly shattered into hundreds of ice shards. The golden rock's wings also trembled violently and flashed with a dark golden light. Immediately after, more than a dozen powerful flaming blades struck the pair of golden wings. There was another dull sound. Ji Tianqing was sent flying and smashed into the ruins not far away. The golden wings trembled violently and the golden light dimmed a little. It was obvious that their power had weakened a lot. Upon seeing this, Division Leader Wang and Deacon Sun frowned their eyebrows, as their eyes flickered with excitement. The two of them had been hiding under Mount God's ceiling for more than 20 days. They had patiently watched the battle and waited until the last moment to attack. Originally, they were confident that they would be able to kill Ji Tianqing with a single strike. However, they did not expect that Ji Tianqing, who was already at the end of his rope, still had a trump card that could block their fatal attack. Swoosh! With a flash of golden light, Ji Tianqing unfolded his golden rock wings and revealed his body. He flew out from the rubble ruins and stared at Division Leader Wang and Deacon Sun with a sharp gaze. His entire body emitted a killing intent that soared to the heavens. With a cold voice, he shouted, "You two also want to steal the sword?" Division Leader Wang and Deacon Sun were startled for a moment. Their eyes under the bronze masks revealed sinister sneers. "That's right. Since you know, why don't you hand over the sword of burial of heaven?" Ji Tianqing furrowed his brows. Many questions popped up in his mind, and anger surged in his heart. Of course, he knew that these two masked men in black were not in cahoots with the previous two. However, he could not understand how these people knew that he had the sword of burial of heaven. Why would these two groups of people take such a huge risk to kill people at the foot of Mount God Bestowment and steal the sword? Division Leader Wang and Deacon Sun didn't give him any time to think. They immediately brandished their treasured sabers and released their bronze crossbows to attack him. Sky Saber Splitter! Division Leader Wang shouted angrily. He held the black treasured saber with both hands and slashed out 81 times in an instant. Each saber light was hundreds of feet long. They flickered with golden light and were extremely sharp and domineering. The 81 saber lights formed a crisscrossing saber net that descended from the sky toward Ji Tianqing. The saber net sealed the area within a radius of 10 miles, leaving him with no way to escape. Deacon Sun also activated the bronze crossbow with all his strength. He released 3 dark golden arrows that shot toward Ji Tianqing's forehead, throat, and heart. Ji Tianqing was in a perilous situation. If he couldn't block the saber lights and arrows, his life would be in danger. At this critical moment, he didn't hesitate to use the primordial spirit golden sword and took out the sword of burial of heaven. "Burial of heaven, lend me a hand." He used his divine thought to send a message to the sword soul of burial of heaven. In the next moment, the sword of burial of heaven expanded to 1,000 feet tall and merged with the primordial spirit golden sword again. Then, his body emitted a golden light that shot into the sky. His body turned into a dazzling brilliance and merged with the primordial spirit golden sword. The primordial spirit golden sword was formed by the fusion of the primordial spirit, the sword of burial of heaven, and Ji Tianqing. Its power had reached its peak. White Tiger Sacred Sword. Following a roar that sounded like a tiger's roar, 1,000 feet long golden sword released a huge white tiger shadow that slashed toward Division Leader Wang and Deacon Sunday. This was one of Kenshin's sword arts, the four spiritual sacred sword. Back then, Ji Tianqing was only at the Yuan Dan realm and he could use this sword technique. However, this secret skill was a sacred sword art that Kenshin had created himself. Only a martial sage would be able to unleash the full power of the sword skill. Now, Ji Tianqing was stronger and had a deeper understanding of the sword arts. The power of the White Tiger Sacred Sword was even more terrifying. Kaboom! The huge net formed by the 81 rays of saber radiance was instantly shattered by the White Tiger Sacred Sword and scattered in all directions. The 3 arrows that were shot toward them were also shattered on the spot by the White Tiger Sacred Sword. Division Leader Wang and Deacon Sun's attacks were actually so weak under the White Tiger Sacred Sword. The two of them looked on helplessly as the huge sword slashed down on them. However, they were suppressed by the terrifying power and had no time to dodge or escape. Their eyes were filled with shock and fear. They were shocked that Ji Tianqing could use such a marvelous sword technique and were fearful of the terrifying power of the sword of burial of heaven. Bang! With a loud muffled sound, Division Leader Wang and Deacon Sun were sent flying by the huge golden sword. They crashed into the ground with a loud bang. A huge ravine that was 30 miles long and 10,000 feet wide was formed on the rocky ground. Endless crushed stones flew into the sky and the earth within a radius of a few hundred miles trembled. The majestic Mount God bestowment shook again. At the bottom of the huge ravine, Division Leader Wang and Deacon Sun were lying in the ruins covered with blood. Their bodies were covered by the earth and rocks. Fortunately, the two of them had the strength of the Tribulation Realm, so they were lucky enough to escape and block the White Tiger Sacred Sword's attack. However, their corporeal bodies were filled with cracks like broken porcelain bowls. Dark golden blood soaked their robes and mixed with the earth. They looked very miserable. Their primordial spirits were also injured by the White Tiger Sacred Sword. Their consciousness was somewhat blurry and drowsy. At this moment, Deacon Sun recalled what Division Leader Wang had said before. After all, that is Kenshin's sword. Not to mention injuring them, even if it killed them instantly, it would be reasonable. He had personally experienced the terrifying power of the sword of burial of heaven and his heart was filled with regret. Damn it! We already knew the terrifying power of the sword of burial of heaven and saw the two of them being seriously injured with our own eyes. Why did we also end up like this and repeat the same mistake? At this moment, Ji Tianqing used the secret technique again and his body fused with the huge sword once more. He wanted to use the Vermilion Bird Sacred Sword to deal with Division Leader Wang and Deacon Sunday. The two of them suddenly woke up and were filled with anger and worry. Chapter 15-17. Although Division Leader Wang and Deacon Sun were both at the first level of the Tribulation Transcendence Realm, they did not know each other. They did not know Ji Tianqing at all, let alone Ji Tianqing's true strength and trump cards. Division Leader Wang's wrong judgment led to them being injured by the White Tiger Sacred Sword. Not only did Ji Tianqing not fall into a weakened state, but he also used an even more powerful ultimate move. If they continued to fight, they would not be able to gain the upper hand at all, and they would not be able to obtain the Sword of Burial of Heaven. When the golden armored guards of Mount God Ceiling arrived, not only would their plan fail, but they would also be captured. At that time, their identities would be exposed. Swoosh! Swoosh! The two of them flew into the sky with all their might, turning into two streams of light and quickly disappearing into the horizon. With Ji Tianqing's strength, he could not catch up to them at all. He could only watch as they escaped. Swoosh! The golden light faded, and his figure appeared, standing in the sky. The sword of burial of heaven and the essence soul golden sword quickly separated, shrinking thousands of times, and returned to his body. He looked up at the sky and saw a few golden lights flashing through the clouds. A team of golden armored guards was rushing over as fast as lightning. He frowned and thought for a moment, then used the divine concealment step to stay invisible. He went around the golden armored guards and returned to the peak of Mount God ceiling from the side. 100 breaths have passed since I was attacked, and the golden armored guards have only just arrived. They are really slow. Don't tell me they don't care about anything outside of Mount God ceiling. Ji Tianqing hid in the clouds and looked down at the golden armored guards, thinking silently. The golden armored guards rushed to the square at the foot of the mountain and began to search and investigate. However, the valley and flat land within 100 miles had become ruins full of holes and cracks. Even the walls of Mount God bestowment were left with 2 huge craters and spiderweb-like cracks. Other than that, there were no other clues. The golden armored guards searched the ruins for a long time, but they did not find any clues and could only return empty-handed. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing quietly returned to the peak of Mount God ceiling and entered the clear sky pagoda. Soon, he returned to the divine book pavilion. As usual, the second guardian was sitting in the corner of the hall, curled up in an armchair in the dark. Ji Tianqing walked in front of her and calmly reported, "Second protector, I have brought back the books from the White Knight Empire." The second guardian was curled up in his loose black robe. When he heard Ji Tianqing's voice, he opened his turbid green eyes and glanced at him. "Put those books on the bookshelves according to their categories." She ordered slowly, then closed her eyes and continued to nap. Ji Tianqing's white robe was tattered, his hair was messy, and his body was stained with dust and blood. However, she acted as if she did not see it. She did not react at all, nor did she open her mouth to ask. Ji Tianqing glanced at her expressionlessly and turned to walk to the bookshelf not far away. He took out the black ring, took out a few thousand books from it, and arranged them on the corresponding bookshelves according to different categories. An hour later, he put all the books on the shelves and returned to the secret room. The previous battle consumed most of his magic power, and he also suffered some minor injuries. Fortunately, with the help of the burial of heaven, he was able to beat back the 2 waves of attackers. After he treated his injuries, he sat on the futon and closed his eyes to rest, silently pondering. Whether it is the great guardian or the second guardian, they are both unreasonable people. This clear sky pagoda is not like the sky-bearing sect and the monarch mansion that I used to stay in. The rules here are strict, and there is no human touch to speak of. The great guardian is cold and strict. The second guardian saw that I was injured but did not care. The golden armored guards also came late, humph. The so-called Holy Land of martial arts may have some divinity, but there is not much humanity. Ji Tianqing secretly thought in his heart, and the corner of his mouth hooked up into a disdainful sneer. He decided to hide the fact that he was attacked at the foot of the mountain and would never report it to the people of the clear sky pagoda. After all, he had offended the great guardian, and even if the great guardian knew that he had been attacked, he would most likely turn a blind eye. Most importantly, if he reported this matter to the 2 guardians and the divine envoys, it would implicate the sword of the burial of heaven. 2 groups of people who have nothing to do with me actually ran to the foot of Mount God Seal and took a huge risk to snatch the sword of the burial of heaven. How did they know that the sword of the burial of heaven was in my hands? And why did they try so hard to snatch it? Ever since he had come to Shenwu continent, he had only shown his face in the Outcloud Empire and had never gone to the Day-Night Empire. Now, 2 envoys from the Day-Night Empire had actually attacked him and tried to snatch the sword of the burial of heaven. He could not help but wonder if the sword of the burial of heaven was hiding some shocking secret that had caused these people to be so crazy about it. Previously, he had read hundreds of thousands of books and had a sufficient understanding of Kenshin's life experiences and legends. He knew that Kenshin was the #1 powerhouse on Shinwu continent, and he was worshipped by millions of warriors. The sword of the burial of heaven that Kenshin was wearing was naturally a divine sword that was known throughout the continent. Although the burial of heaven is a divine sword that everyone knows, 1,000 years have passed, and the burial of heaven in my hands is damaged and incomplete. Who would be able to recognize that it is the sword of the burial of heaven? When he thought of this question, his first reaction was that it was someone from the Outcloud Empire. After I came to Shinwu continent, I only traveled around the Outcloud Empire. The news of the burial of heaven must have been leaked at that time. At that time, Emperor Outcloud personally came to find me and saw my sword of the burial of heaven. Could it be that he recognized the sword of the burial of heaven and spread the news? If not, how could the people of the Day-Night Empire know that I have the sword of the burial of heaven? But why didn't Emperor Outcloud directly seize the sword of the burial of heaven after recognizing it? Instead, why did he spread the news and let the powerhouses of other countries come to Mount Godseal to seize the sword? Ji Tianqing analyzed the situation for a while and determined that it was Emperor Outcloud who had recognized the sword of the burial of heaven and spread the news. However, he could not understand why Emperor Outcloud had done this. Was he trying to get someone else to do his dirty work? Emperor Outcloud was a martial saint powerhouse, so there was no need for the emperor of a country to do such a thing. Ji Tianqing pondered for a long time, but he still could not figure out this problem. However, he was certain that a huge conspiracy was coming his way. After a while, he thought of another, more important problem. Since Emperor Outcloud could recognize the sword of the burial of heaven, then the first, second, and divine envoys of the Clear Sky Pagoda might also recognize it. Fortunately, I haven't used the sword of the burial of heaven in front of everyone since I came to the Clear Sky Pagoda. If the sword of the burial of heaven was exposed, who knows how much trouble and disturbance it would cause. It looks like I have to be extra careful in the future and hide the sword of the burial of heaven. Unless it's absolutely necessary, I can't use it. After making up his mind, he stretched out his right hand and brought out the sword of the burial of heaven. Just as he was about to put the sword of the burial of heaven into his spatial ring, a clear voice rang out in his mind. Chapter 15:18. Hearing this voice, Ji Tianqing was startled. Soon after, he smiled and sent a voice transmission, "Qian Yu, you've already finished your seclusion." The voice transmission came from Qian Yu. Ever since he left the profound sky continent, Qian Yu and the little black dragon had been cultivating in seclusion in the sword world. Qian Yu's clear voice rang out in his mind once more, 20 days ago, I finished my seclusion and my strength has increased by a great deal. Old Ji, come in quickly, I've made a great discovery. A great discovery? Ji Tianqing raised an eyebrow, his interest piqued. He opened the entrance to the sword world and his figure flashed into the sword world, appearing in the sky above peaceful Earth City. Qian Yu was flying in the blue sky, his body over 300 meters long and his 12 furry tails flickering with an icy blue light. After not seeing him for a long time, Ji Tianqing sized him up and found that his strength had reached the 5th layer of the spirit refining realm. When Qian Yu saw him, she hurriedly flew over, her clear eyes filled with excitement. Old Ji, come with me, I'll take you to a place. As he spoke, he carried Ji Tianqing on his back and flew towards the northeast of peaceful Earth City. Ji Tianqing was a little confused and asked, Qian Yu, where are you taking me? What did you discover? Qian Yu flew through the sky as fast as lightning and said, Old Ji, the sword world is growing every day, constantly expanding its space. You should know this, right? Of course. Ji Tianqing nodded and explained, as the burial of heaven's strength continues to recover, the sword world will also expand. When the burial of heaven recovers to its peak, the sword world will also return to its original state, becoming a great world. Xian Yu nodded to express his understanding and explained, 20 days ago, when I finished my seclusion, I went around the sword world to see how much it had expanded. As a result, I discovered a mysterious forbidden area at the northern border. Mysterious forbidden area? Ji Tianqing frowned and asked doubtfully, what is the forbidden area? Xian Yu said excitedly, that forbidden area is in the mountains, sealed by a powerful formation, it looks majestic and magnificent. Unfortunately, with my strength, I can't get close at all, nor can I see the situation inside the forbidden area. Hearing what it said, Ji Tianqing became more confused and expectant. He said seriously, take me to see it. Xian Yu sped up, crossing one majestic mountain range after another, rushing towards the end of the horizon. About 2 hours later, Xian Yu finally reached the end of the sword world. Boundless darkness appeared in the sky and on the ground in front of him. It was like an icy void. In the mountains next to the dark zone, there was a huge valley with a circumference of over 200 miles. The valley was surrounded by towering mountain ranges, and it looked like a coiled dragon. In the flat valley, there was a huge light shield with a circumference of 100 miles. It emitted a 7-colored divine light and an incomparably powerful aura. Ji Tianqing and Xian Yu came to the top of the valley. They stopped 1,000 feet in the air and looked down at the entire valley. The 7-colored light shield with a circumference of 100 miles was shining with a dazzling brilliance. The light shield was very thick and was not transparent. The situation inside was faintly discernible, making it difficult to see clearly. Invisible shockwaves were emitted from the 7-colored light shield and spread in all directions. Ji Tianqing observed for a moment and saw that this was an incomparably powerful divine-level formation. Perhaps only martial gods could activate it. The invisible shockwaves were just the natural fluctuations of divine power when the divine-level formation was in operation. But to Qian Yu, this power of the shockwaves was terrifying enough. It stopped 1,000 feet in the air, desperately resisting the shockwaves, but it seemed to be very difficult. Every time the shockwaves swept past, its huge body would tremble and burst out with an icy blue brilliance. It would consume a large amount of magic power to stay here for even a breath of time. Ji Tianqing saw that it was very uncomfortable and asked it to retreat far away. Then, he descended from the sky near the 7-colored light shield and observed it closely. Strangely, the powerful shockwaves from the divine-level formation automatically swept past him and did not cause any impact or pressure on him. He observed carefully around the 7-colored light shield and was not affected in the slightest. After a quarter of an hour, he circled around the divine-level formation and finally saw the situation inside the light shield. The ground within a radius of 100 miles was paved with huge black stones, making it look like an enormous altar. At the top of the altar, there was a huge black stone tablet that was 1,000 meters tall. There seemed to be words carved on the black stone tablet, but he could not see them clearly. He could only sense that the black stone tablet seemed to be similar to the sky sword stele and the 18 tombstones in the Kenshin tomb. An ancient divine tier formation protecting a huge altar and a mysterious stone tablet. Why would these things appear in the sword world? What secrets are hidden in the altar and the stone tablet? With doubts in his heart, Ji Tianqing used his divine sense to send a message to Burial of Heaven. Buried Heaven, I've discovered a god-level formation in the sword world. There's a black altar and a gigantic stone tablet in it. Do you know what this grand formation, altar, and stele are? Burial of Heaven seemed to ponder for a while before replying in a solemn tone, look carefully at the altar and stone tablet, what do you think they look like? Ji Tianqing stared at the huge altar and stone tablet in the light shield. After a few careful glances, he suddenly frowned. Why do this altar and stone tablet look like a tomb? That's right, Burial of Heaven said in a low voice, that is a tomb, a Kenshin tomb. Ji Tianqing's brows immediately knit together. With a strange expression, he asked, Burial of Heaven, that can't be right, right? Isn't the real Kenshin tomb inside my body? Burial of Heaven said in a solemn and respectful voice, "There is something I didn't tell you. There are actually two real Kenshin tombs, the Yin and Yang tombs. Before Kenshin fell, he used up all of his divine power to construct them. They contain heaven-shaking mysteries and peerless treasures. The Kenshin tomb inside your body is the Yin tomb. It contains Kenshin's sword arts and legacies. The Kenshin tomb in front of you is the Yang tomb. It contains Kenshin's relics and other things. The Yin and Yang tombs. So that's how it is." Ji Tianqing immediately understood. He stared at the Yang tomb with shining eyes and thought to himself, "The Yin tomb inside my body not only has 18 tombstones, but also records Kenshin's supreme sword arts. There is another world inside the tombstones that connects the Heavenly Tome Pavilion and the Divine Weapon Pavilion. The importance of this Yang tomb shouldn't be any less than the Yin tomb. I wonder what treasures are stored inside." Chapter 15-19. Ji Tianqing stared at the Yang tomb within the rainbow barrier, his heart filled with anticipation. "Burial of Heaven, how can I enter the Yang tomb?" Burial of Heaven said calmly, "The formation protecting the Yang tomb is a great divine formation. Kenshin personally set it up and incorporated his formation Dao techniques. You can find the method to open it in the Heavenly Sutra Pavilion. Once you reach the martial god realm, you should be able to do so." "What? I need to reach the martial god realm to open it?" Ji Tianqing immediately frowned. "It'll be at least a few decades before I reach the martial god realm." Burial of Heaven, is there any way to open the divine formation ahead of time? Burial of Heaven said indifferently, "Yes, I can help you open the divine formation." After a pause, it added, "But not now. My body hasn't recovered and my strength hasn't recovered, so there's no way I can open the divine formation. Unless you can help me repair the sword and restore my strength to around 70%. Ji Tianqing thought for a moment and nodded. In comparison, repairing Burial of Heaven's sword should be easier than reaching the martial god realm. I can consider this method. But where can I find the materials to repair the divine sword? Burial of Heaven said solemnly, "I'll naturally tell you what materials are needed in the future. Everything about Kenshin is buried in the Yin-Yang tombs. If you can combine the tombs one day, you'll be able to discover the earth-shattering treasures that Kenshin left behind." Ji Tianqing's eyes flashed with a shrewd light. He hurriedly asked, "What earth-shattering treasures?" Burial of Heaven said with some disdain, "It's a top secret that can shock the world and shake the 9 heavens." "Then what is it?" Ji Tianqing's interest was piqued and he grew increasingly curious. Burial of Heaven said gravely, "With your current strength and situation, it's best if you don't know. You'll naturally understand once you open the divine formation and enter the Yang tomb." This answer from the Burial of Heaven made Ji Tianqing feel rather helpless. He could only suppress his curiosity and anticipation as he turned around and left the valley. Qian Yu was waiting outside the valley. When he saw Ji Yunshu come back, he quickly greeted him and asked, "Old Ji, how was it? Did you find any clues?" "We'll talk about it when we get back." Ji Tianqing flew onto its back and ordered it to return to the peaceful Soil City. An hour later, he brought Qian Yu back to the peaceful Soil City and used a secret sound transmission technique to summon the Golden Mountain King. After a short conversation, Ji Tianqing realized that the Jinshan King did not know about the 7-colored array. Therefore, he warned the Jinshan King, "The great formation in the valley is a powerful divine grade formation. It is extraordinarily powerful. Don't let anyone get close to it to avoid being accidentally injured." The Jinshan King cupped his hands, indicating that he would do as he was told. Ji Tianqing then turned to Qian Yu and said, "Qian Yu, you don't have to go there anymore. It's too dangerous." Qian Yu naturally nodded in agreement. Soon after, Ji Tianqing left the peaceful Soil City and flew to the mountains in the west to visit the Little Black Dragon. According to Qian Yu, the Little Black Dragon found a miraculous pool in the depths of the mountains in the west. There seemed to be a spring in the pool that gushed out spiritual water, making the entire pool seem like a paradise. Ever since the little black dragon discovered the pool, it had been coiled up in the pool, unwilling to leave. It had been cultivating in the pool the entire time. Ji Tianqing was curious and wanted to see it for himself. The sword world continued to expand, and many wondrous things appeared. This small world was no longer monotonous and became colorful. He was looking forward to the future. When the burial of heaven recovered its strength, the sword world would expand into a complete large world. At that time, there would be even more wondrous things, right? An hour later, he flew to the depths of the mountains in the west. When he was still a few hundred miles away, he saw a five-colored auspicious cloud in the sky in front of him. This auspicious cloud was over 100 miles in radius and was suspended between several towering mountains. It did not dissipate even when the wind blew. The five-colored auspicious cloud was formed from the dense spiritual energy of heaven and earth. It constantly condensed drops of five-colored spiritual liquid that sprinkled down like rain. Below the auspicious cloud was a lake that was several dozen miles in radius and was surrounded by towering mountains. Looking down from the sky, this lake was like a mirror. There were many clouds floating above the lake, creating a scene of rosy clouds. Upon closer inspection, one would discover that the lake water was faintly seven-colored and contained dense spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Ji Tianqing flew to the air above the lake. He looked around and saw some clues. 5 mountain ranges intersected here, forming a deep valley in the middle. After it was filled with water, it turned into a lake. There are 5 tall mountains around the lake, occupying the positions of the 5 elements and forming a natural 5 elements array. This is where the spiritual energy of the 5 elements gathers and is a natural land of spirit veins. No wonder there is a spirit spring here. The little black dragon is really lucky to be able to find this natural spirit vein and gather the spiritual energy of the 5 elements in a radius of several 100,000 miles to help it cultivate and become stronger. He muttered to himself, a gratified smile appearing on his face. The surrounding mountains were protected by the 5 peaks. The lake water was as calm as a mirror and clouds slowly flowed in the air. There were also 5-colored auspicious clouds in the sky that constantly sprinkled spiritual rain. It was truly a peaceful land of treasures, like a paradise. Ji Tianqing observed for a while before calling out to the calm lake, "Little black dragon, come out and meet me." As his voice fell, the originally calm center of the lake gradually rippled and rippled, spreading out in all directions. In a few short breaths, the lake water in a radius of 10 miles seemed to be boiling as huge waves surged. Then, a huge black shadow emerged from the water and broke through the water surface with a splash, flying into the sky. Roar! A resounding and majestic dragon roar resounded, echoing between the mountains. A 10-mile-long black dragon with a cold and majestic aura appeared in the air above the lake. It was the little black dragon. Now, not only was its body 10 miles long and majestic to the extreme, the dragon's scales all over its body shone with a dazzling cold light. To ordinary people, this water surface with a radius of dozens of miles could be called a large lake. However, compared to the huge body of the black dragon, this water surface could only be called a pool. Whoosh! The black dragon flew across the sky like lightning and quickly arrived in front of Ji Tianqing. It nodded slightly and said in a low muffled voice, "Old Ji, how did you find this place?" Ji Tianqing stepped onto the dragon's back and sized it up as he said, "I heard from Qianyue that you found a treasured land, so I came to see for myself. I didn't expect your strength to have improved so much in just 2 months." Chapter 15:20. The little black dragon circled above the lake, inhaling and exhaling like a whale sucking in water. It had a leisurely look on its face, and its tone was full of joy. "Old Ji, I talked to Qianyue before, and my situation is the same as hers. I don't know why, but ever since we broke through to the spirit refining realm, it's as if we've awakened our bloodlines, gained intelligence, and innate gifts. Our cultivation speed has increased by leaps and bounds. Before, we thought that it was the sacred phoenix heart's powerful effects that brought about such changes. But now, I feel that it's not just the sacred phoenix heart's effects. There might be other reasons as well. After listening to the little black dragon's words, Ji Tianqing smiled and explained, "You are not a flood dragon from the East Sea, but a true divine dragon. Qian Yu has an extraordinary background as well, and she is a sky fox. Both of you are divine beasts, and your future achievements are limitless. You will definitely reach the deity realm. Only after reaching the spirit refining realm did you awaken your divine beast bloodlines and innate gifts. That is the beginning of your growth. Don't worry too much about this matter, just focus on your cultivation. When you and Qian Yu break through to the primordial spirit realm, we will be able to roam the Shenwu continent unhindered and roam the world." The little black dragon nodded solemnly, and a look of anticipation appeared in its large eyes. "Old Ji, we know that it won't be long before you go and find Yunyao. At that time, you will definitely encounter many dangers and obstacles, so we have been cultivating diligently. We hope that we can help you in the future." Hearing its serious and sincere words, Ji Tianqing's heart warmed slightly, and he nodded. "All right. I also look forward to the two of you becoming stronger as soon as possible and roaming the world with me." He chatted with the little black dragon for a while longer before leaving the 5 elemental spirit lakes. Not long after, he exited the sword world and returned to his private room to continue cultivating. It was late at night, and not a sound could be heard. A bright moon hung high in the sky, sprinkling down bright moonlight. At the peak of Godseal Mountain, the 6 palaces that housed the geniuses of the 6 nations were still lit. Within the day-night palace, in a dark room, there were specks of dazzling multicolored light. A young man in a black robe was sitting on a futon made of spiritual jade. This person's figure was tall and straight, and his face was like jade. He wore the attire of an elegant young master, and his bearing was rather noble and refined. He was the #1 genius of the White Knight Empire, the 7th son of the White Knight Holy Emperor, Song Zhanyu. At this moment, he was holding a white communication jade slip with both hands, which was flashing with white light. The jade slip recorded a secret order from the White Knight Holy Emperor. After he finished reading the order with his divine sense, he frowned and began to ponder. After a long time, he put the jade slip into his interspatial ring and murmured with a complicated expression, "Ji Tianqing, the sword of burial of heaven, who would have thought that the world's #1 divine sword would be in his hands?" This person was the #1 genius of the Chu Yun Empire. The great emperor of the Chu Yun Empire actually did not discover that he possessed the sword of burial of heaven and allowed him to come to the clear sky pagoda. Was this the will of the heavens? It was destined that the sword of burial of heaven would not belong to the Chu Yun Empire. After Ji Tianqing came to the clear sky pagoda, he did not use any weapons or magic treasures. It seemed that he intentionally hid the existence of the sword of burial of heaven. If not for the order from my father, I would not have known this secret. The light in his eyes became sharper and sharper. He secretly clenched his fists and murmured to himself, "However, since I know this secret, I must find an opportunity to snatch the sword of burial of heaven. If I can snatch the sword of burial of heaven for my father, I may be able to help my father advance to the martial god realm. At that time, my father will be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with martial god Taihao and I will become the new holy emperor." Speaking of this, the corners of his mouth curled up into a faint sneer, and his eyes surged with traces of anticipation. However, he calmly pondered for a moment and the sneer on his lips gradually disappeared. It's a pity that Ji Tianqing seems to be highly regarded and protected by the little princess. He was punished to clean the Divine Book Pavilion for half a year. In this half a year, he will probably stay in the Divine Book Pavilion and I will not have a chance to make a move. Could it be that I can only wait until half a year later during the God-Disciple test to make a move? That won't do. I have to think of a way as soon as possible and find a chance to make a move. Thinking of this, he frowned and pondered. Time passed very quickly. Unknowingly, another half a month had passed. In this half a month, Ji Tianqing had been in closed-door cultivation in the Divine Book Pavilion's secret chamber and no one came to disturb him. After half a month of bitter cultivation, his strength steadily advanced towards the 6th level of the Essence Spirit realm. It was a pity that he still could not fully comprehend the 6th move of the 9 swords of burial of heaven. Early in the morning, he ended his closed-door cultivation and walked out of the secret chamber. He walked to the edge of the hall and prepared to find some ancient books to read from a row of bookshelves. At this moment, his gaze passed through the wide window and suddenly caught a glimpse of the square below the clear sky pagoda. There was a mighty troop that was walking towards a certain palace. It was an honor guard of about 200 people. There were more than 100 guards dressed in silver armor and more than 100 young and dignified maidservants. The guards had a dignified bearing while the maidservants' clothes fluttered in the wind. They carried all kinds of musical instruments and carried bamboo baskets filled with flowers. In the middle of the honor guard was a golden carriage inlaid with gold and jade. It had an imperial canopy and was surrounded by jeweled curtains. Ji Tianqing looked down at the honor guard from above. He could not see the person in the golden carriage, nor could he guess the identity of the person riding the carriage. But he thought to himself that a person who could put on such a grand display and enter God's Ceiling Mountain summit with such fanfare was likely to have an extraordinary background. Could it be Divine Lord Taihao's divine son or princess? Jiuzhou's elder brother or sister? Moments later, the honor guard entered a resplendent palace before he retracted his gaze. Just as he turned his head, he saw the black-robed second guardian standing not far from him. The second protector came without a sound, like a ghost. The pair of turbid eyes under the black robe were also staring at the square below the clear sky pagoda, watching the honor guard enter the palace. Ji Tianqing hesitated before asking, "Second guardian, that troop just now, whose honor guard is it?" Second guardian looked out of the window expressionlessly and said in a hoarse and calm voice, "It's the crown prince of the Thousand Snow Empire, Lu Li. He was once a disciple of the Clear Sky Pagoda. After he achieved great success, he left the Clear Sky Pagoda and returned to the Thousand Snow Empire to be conferred the title of Crown Prince. Every 3 years, he will return to the Clear Sky Pagoda to pay his respects to Divine Lord Taihao in the temple. But he will first stay in the Temple of Tranquility for 7 days. After 7 days of cleansing, he will go to the temple to pay his respects." "I see." Ji Tianqing nodded to show that he understood. Second guardian showed a gratified expression and continued, "Lu Li is very outstanding. He has come to the Divine Book Pavilion countless times, flipping through books without sleep or food. He has also consulted me many times about Taoist scriptures." Chapter 1521. In Ji Tianqing's eyes, the second guardian was a mysterious and unreasonable weird old woman. But when she talked about the crown prince of the Thousand Snow Empire, Lu Li, her tone and eyes were much gentler, revealing some kindness. Ji Tianqing immediately realized that in the second guardian's eyes, only a diligent and inquisitive young man like Lu Li, who focused on reading books, was a genius with both integrity and talent. And someone like him, who had been in the Divine Book Pavilion for more than a month and only knew how to read history books and biographies, was a piece of rotten wood that could not be carved. Ji Tianqing was well aware of this point, but he did not bother to argue about it. That crown prince of the Thousand Snow Empire, Lu Li, had nothing to do with him, so he did not care. After a while, the second guardian slowly walked away. Ji Tianqing also returned to the secret chamber and continued to cultivate. Staying in the Divine Book Pavilion, the days were boring and dull. But he had long been used to it. Instead, he felt very comfortable and at ease, which was more convenient for him to cultivate and comprehend swordsmanship. However, the peaceful days were only 3 days old when they were interrupted. In the evening, Ji Tianqing was cultivating in the secret chamber. Suddenly, the second guardian's deep voice came from outside the door, Ji Tianqing, come out quickly. I have something to tell you. Ji Tianqing was interrupted. He could not help but frown. He got up slowly and walked out of the secret chamber. The second guardian was standing outside the door. Seeing him come out, the second guardian said expressionlessly, for the next few days, you don't have to stay in the Divine Book Pavilion. Go to the Hall of Tranquility and wait for orders. Hearing this, Ji Tianqing was stunned. He frowned and asked, Hall of Tranquility? Isn't that where the Crown Prince of the Thousand Snow Empire lives temporarily? Yes. The second guardian nodded and said indifferently, after you go to the Hall of Tranquility, you must obey orders and serve the Crown Prince of the Thousand Snow Empire. Let me serve Lu Li. Ji Tianqing frowned. He stared at the second guardian and asked, Second guardian, is this your arrangement? Ever since Lu Li's procession of honor arrived at the Mountain of Investiture, he had been staying in the Clear Heaven Pagoda. Now, second guardian suddenly told him to serve Lu Li at the Hall of Tranquility. No matter how one looked at it, it seemed to be the second guardian's decision. After all, she valued Lu Li. However, Ji Tianqing was dissatisfied and secretly thought, not to mention the Crown Prince of the Thousand Snow Empire, even the Holy Emperor of the Thousand Snow Empire is not qualified for me to serve. Are you treating me like a servant? The second protector glanced at him as if he had seen through his thoughts. He explained in a cold tone, I'm just informing you. This is not my intention. This is the decision of the Grand Guardian. I heard that Lu Li is interested in you after hearing about your story. That is why he begged the Grand Guardian to let you go to the Hall of Tranquility. It's the Great Guardian again. This thought flashed through Ji Tianqing's mind. He wondered to himself, this Lu Li, I don't think he is just curious about me. He must have some other purpose. While Lu Li was thinking, the second guardian had turned around and left. He said in a dignified voice, you are now a criminal. Don't even think about disobeying the orders of the Grand Guardian. Otherwise, you will be punished even more. Go to the Hall of Tranquility now. If you are smart enough and can make Lu Li happy, maybe he can put in a good word for you in front of the Grand Guardian. With that said, the second guardian disappeared into the darkness and left quietly. Ji Tianqing curled his lips and sneered to himself, he is just a crown prince of an empire. How arrogant he is. I'd like to see what medicine is hidden in this guy's gourd and what he wants to do. Then, he left the Divine Book Pavilion and walked out of the Clear Heaven Pagoda. The sky was getting dark. Night was about to fall. The entire peak of the Mountain of Investiture was shrouded in darkness. Many of the palaces were lit with lights. It was very quiet. Only the Hall of Tranquility was not only brightly lit, but there were also more than 200 people living in the palace. The sound of people and music could be heard constantly. Ji Tianqing walked across the square unhurriedly and walked to the gate of the Hall of Tranquility. Besides several golden-armored imperial bodyguards guarding the gate of the palace, there was also a middle-aged man wearing a blue robe and a crown on his head. This person's attire was like a steward of the palace. He also looked like a deacon who was in charge of internal affairs. Seeing Ji Tianqing arrive, the blue-robed man waved at him and said with a kind expression, "May I ask if you are young Master Ji Tianqing?" Ji Tianqing saw that his attitude was somewhat respectful. He couldn't help but be puzzled. He raised his eyebrows and asked, "You are?" The blue-robed man smiled and cupped his hands in greeting, saying, "Greetings, young Master Ji. My surname is Fong. I am Crown Prince Qianshue's supervisor of internal affairs. I followed His Highness to the Mountain of Investiture to manage internal affairs for His Highness." Ji Tianqing nodded at him as a greeting. Supervisor Fong was quite astute. He could see that Ji Tianqing's personality was cold and he didn't want to talk too much. He hurriedly extended his hand and made a gesture of invitation. "Young Master Ji, this is not the place to talk. Please follow me into the palace to see His Highness the Crown Prince. Ji Tianqing glanced at him and didn't say anything. He silently followed behind him and entered the Hall of Tranquility. Not long after, the two of them entered the magnificent guest hall. A handsome young man in an embroidered robe and a golden crown of dragon and phoenix sat on the large jade chair at the head of the table. This person was tall and handsome. His temperament was elegant and he didn't lose his masculinity. He was really a handsome young master of a noble family. He was sitting on the chair and holding an ancient scroll. He was engrossed in reading. There was a thoughtful expression between his eyebrows. Two young and beautiful maids dressed in long, thin dresses were nestled by his feet, gently massaging his legs. Seeing this scene, Ji Tianqing guessed that this person must be the Crown Prince of the Thousand Snow Empire, Lu Li. Sure enough, Supervisor Fong walked in front of Lu Li and bowed. He reported, "Your Highness the Crown Prince, young Master Ji has been invited." Lu Li quickly raised his head and put down the ancient scroll in his hand. He looked at Ji Tianqing with a face full of joy. The two guards were very tactful. After bowing to him, they silently took their leave. Lu Li stood up and walked towards Ji Tianqing. With a smile on his face, he cupped his hands and said, "This must be young Master Ji Tianqing, right? I am Lu Li. I have been looking forward to meeting young Master Ji for a long time." Although Ji Tianqing saw that Lu Li was so polite, he guessed that this person must have other intentions. However, as the saying goes, one doesn't slap a smiling face. Since the other party was so polite, he nodded calmly and greeted him. "Crown Prince Lu is too polite." The two exchanged some pleasantries and sat down. Supervisor Fong brought a cup of spirit tea for Ji Tianqing and silently stood next to Lu Li. Ji Tianqing didn't beat around the bush with Lu Li. He asked directly, "Crown Prince Lu, I don't know you and we have nothing to do with each other." Chapter 1522. Hearing Ji Tianqing's words, Lu Li was stunned. He put on a self-mocking smile and hurried to explain, "Young Master Ji, you misunderstood. You are the number one genius of the Chu-Yun Empire. How dare I let you serve me? I just heard about what happened a month ago. I am very curious about young Master Ji. That is why I asked the Chief Guardian to give an order to invite you to the Hall of Tranquility." Lu Li was the Crown Prince of the Empire of Thousand Snow. Even if he had a noble status, it was only for the people of the Empire of Thousand Snow. Ji Tianqing was the number one genius of the Chu-Yun Empire. There was no need to be polite to him. Even if Lu Li had reached the Tribulation Realm, it was nothing. All the candidates who were qualified to enter the Tower of Haotian could reach the Tribulation Realm in the future. Therefore, Lu Li's words were reasonable. Ji Tianqing didn't ask any more questions. He nodded to show that he understood. He knew that Lu Li wouldn't come to him for no reason. Lu Li would tell him his intentions. He didn't need to say anything. He just needed to wait and see. As expected, Lu Li put away his smile and put on a solemn expression. He looked at Ji Tianqing with glowing eyes and said in a low voice, "Young Master Ji, about the matter of worshipping the Immortal Lord, I have understood the cause and effect. I have thought about it for a long time and I have checked many ancient books and documents. I can conclude that it must be a misunderstanding. Most likely, young Master Ji's talent in martial arts is outstanding. Under special circumstances, you caused such a great change in heaven and earth. It is a pity that this is related to the mysteries of heaven and the great Tao. Ordinary people can't understand it." Lu Li's words were obviously meant to please Ji Tianqing. But he expressed it in a subtle way. It wasn't disgusting and it also showed his profound knowledge and steadiness. If it were an average genius with resentment in his heart, he would feel the same way after hearing Lu Li's words. He might even regard Lu Li as a confidant. However, the person Lu Li met was Ji Tianqing, a very special guy. He glanced at Lu Li and said with a faint smile, "So, Prince Lu also thinks that the chief guardian is ignorant and doesn't understand the mysteries of heaven. Lu Li's expression changed. He quickly waved his hand and said, "Young Master Ji, you misunderstood again. I didn't mean that. On God Bestowment Mountain, he actually dared to speak ill of the great protector. Wasn't that courting death?" Ji Tianqing had no scruples. He stared at him playfully and asked, "What do you mean?" Lu Li also felt that Ji Tianqing was not easy to deal with. He frowned. He pondered for a moment before continuing, "What I mean is, young Master Ji, as the #1 genius of the Chu Yun Empire with outstanding talent, you should have limitless glory. However, a misunderstanding caused his reputation to be tarnished, and he was even punished to clean the Divine Book Pavilion. It was truly a pity. The candidates of the God's disciple from different countries were called young geniuses, but they did not have the corresponding foresight and insight. They even gloated and laughed at Ji Hao behind his back. When this monarch found out about this matter, his heart was also quite unhappy. I feel that young Master Ji is not worth it." His words could not only provoke Ji Tianqing's anger, but also let Ji Tianqing have a sense of approval. It could be said that he had won the hearts of the people. However, Ji Tianqing still looked calm and indifferent. He slowly drank his tea and said, "I am an eagle that soars to the 9 heavens. Why would I care about the criticism of a sparrow?" Lu Li's body trembled. A strange light flashed through his eyes. He sneered in his heart, "What an arrogant kid. He really has no sense of shame." However, on the surface, he put on a look of admiration and said sympathetically, "Young Master Ji, you are wise. You are absolutely right. This is the state of mind of a peerless genius." Then, as an experienced person, he took the initiative to introduce the situation of God Bestowment Mountain to Ji Tianqing, as well as the God's disciple examination and cultivation. After all, he had cultivated at God Bestowment Mountain for more than 100 years. He only left God Bestowment Mountain to return to the Thousand Snow Empire after he reached the 3rd level of the Tribulation Realm. Ji Tianqing listened in silence. He learned many secrets from Lu Li and had a deeper understanding of God's disciples and the Haotian Pagoda. Unknowingly, 2 hours had passed. Most of the time, it was Lu Li who was talking and Ji Tianqing who was listening. However, on the surface, the conversation between the two seemed to be pleasant and harmonious. Lu Li saw that the time was right. He confided in Ji Tianqing and told him his true intentions. "Young Master Ji, I believe you also understand that God Bestowment Mountain is just a holy land for martial arts. It is a place for God's disciples to communicate and cultivate. Most of the God's disciples will leave God Bestowment Mountain in the future and find their own way out. Only a few of the top God's disciples may be favored by the God and promoted to the God's kingdom in the 9 heavens. They will be given a more honorable status. However, only 1 or 2 of these lucky ones will appear in hundreds of years. The chances are very slim. I am afraid that your current situation is not good. Not only will it be difficult for you to be valued, but you may also be ostracized and oppressed. Young Master Ji, with your talent in martial arts, you don't have to be bullied like this. You are not someone with your temperament. Hearing this, Ji Tianqing knew that Lu Li was going to get to the point. He looked at Lu Li calmly, raised his eyebrows and asked, "What do you mean?" Lu Li said solemnly, "Like my father, I value talents the most. I don't want pearls to be covered in dust. Therefore, every few years, I will come to God Bestowment Mountain to pay my respects. I want to help some unaccomplished talents and let them regain their glory. In the future, I will inherit the position of the Holy Emperor of Thousand Snow. I must have talents that I can trust and put in important positions. Young Master Ji, to be honest, I feel like you are an old friend at first sight. I admire you. With great sincerity, I invite you to join the Empire of Thousand Snow. As long as you agree, we will call each other brothers. I will definitely treat you as my most trusted brother. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows. He didn't say anything, but he was laughing in his heart. So, this guy wants to rope me in. He has other plans. Seeing that Ji Tianqing didn't say anything, Lu Li thought that Ji Tianqing was hesitating. Lu Li continued, "Young Master Ji, as long as you are willing to follow me, I will not treat you badly. I will give you the best treatment and cultivation resources. I will make you the most dazzling powerful warrior of the Empire of Thousand Snow." Oh. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and said in a playful tone, "Speaking of which, I remember. The number one genius of the Empire of Thousand Snow, Jiang Ningxue, is more talented and powerful than me. Prince Lu, why don't you try your best to cultivate her? Why are you wasting time on me?" Speaking of Jiang Ningxue, Lu Li was stunned for a moment. Then he put on a playful smile. "Oh, young Master Ji, you have noticed Jiang Ningxue for a long time. What do you think of Jiang Ningxue?" Ji Tianqing said calmly, "She's beautiful, gentle, and talented in martial arts. Of course, she's a one-in-a-million beauty." Chapter 1523. Ji Tianqing didn't expect Lu Li to suddenly say this. An idea popped up in his mind, a honey trap. Looks like this guy is plotting something big. With this thought, he looked at Lu Li calmly and shook his head. "Crown Prince Lu, Jiang Ningxue is a rare beauty, but love is a matter of mutual consent. Besides, I already have a wife. I only want to tie her down. I won't fall in love with anyone else." Lu Li seemed to have expected this answer. He waved his hand with a smile and said, "Young Master Ji, you are wrong. Which man doesn't have 3 wives and 4 concubines? Even the wealthy families in the mortal world have groups of wives and concubines. A proud son of the heavens like you should have countless beauties to match your talent and reputation. As for Jiang Ningxue, you can rest assured. With me as the matchmaker, Jiang Ningxue won't dare to disobey. Besides, young Master Ji is so handsome and talented. Many girls have fallen in love with you. Maybe Jiang Ningxue has some feelings for you." Ji Tianqing just smiled and didn't say anything. Seeing this, Lu Li continued to persuade, "Young Master Ji, even if you already have a wife, Jiang Ningxue can be your concubine. As long as you nod, I will immediately summon Jiang Ningxue to see you and create an opportunity for you two. You two are a perfect match. You are both extraordinary geniuses. If you two can become Taoist companions, it will be a good story." Ji Tianqing waved his hand and said seriously, "I appreciate Crown Prince Lu's kindness, but I have made up my mind. There is no need to mention this again." Seeing that he refused firmly, Lu Li didn't feel embarrassed. He nodded with a smile and said, "In that case, let nature take its course. I think highly of you, so I am a bit impatient." Ji Tianqing stood up, cupped his hands and said, "Crown Prince Lu, it is late. If there is nothing else, I will take my leave." Lu Li nodded and said, "All right, let's stop here for tonight. Young Master Ji, go and rest. I have already asked Steward Fong to arrange a place for you to stay. For the next few days, young Master Ji will stay in this shrine of peace. 4 days later, I would like to invite young Master Ji to follow me to the Divine Hall to pay respects to Divine Lord Taihao." Ji Tianqing was stunned. He frowned at him and asked, "Crown Prince Lu, is this your decision? Or is it the Great Guardian's idea?" Lu Li smiled and explained, "Of course, it is my idea. I know that the previous matter was a misunderstanding, which led to young Master Ji being punished. This monarch has thought about it for a long time before making this decision. I implore the Great Protector to give you another chance. For my sake, the Great Protector agreed to this matter and allowed you to follow me to the temple to pay your respects again. As long as young Master Ji sincerely repents in the Divine Hall, the misunderstanding from before can be resolved and the awkwardness between you and the Great Guardian can be alleviated." With that said, Lu Li put on a confident smile and stared at Ji Tianqing. He thought to himself, Ji Tianqing is now a criminal. Not only did he offend the great protector, but he is also mocked by the young geniuses of various countries. He is a proud and arrogant person. How can he endure such humiliation? He must have a bellyful of resentment in his heart that cannot be resolved. I will plead with the great protector for him and give him a chance to turn over a new leaf. This will give him a way out. As long as he is not an idiot, he will seize this opportunity and he will be grateful to me. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows. After a moment of consideration, he nodded and said, since Crown Prince Lu has good intentions, I will accept deferentially. After all, the great protector has transferred me to the Shrine of Peace and I cannot disobey. I can only stay here and follow Crown Prince Lu's arrangements. Lu Li was delighted to see that Ji Tianqing had agreed. He nodded and said, if so, then it is settled. Steward Fang, take young Master Ji to rest. You must instruct the servants to take good care of young Master Ji and not neglect him. Steward Fang bowed and accepted the order. He took Ji Tianqing out of the living room and walked towards the depths of the palace. After Steward Fang left with Ji Tianqing, Lu Li was still standing in the living room, looking at the curtain of night outside the door. His eyes were filled with shrewdness and a faint sneer hung on the corner of his mouth. He murmured to himself, this damn Ji Tianqing is really a cunning and difficult person to deal with. No wonder Division Leader Wang and Deacon Sun failed in their mission and failed to get the Sword of the Burial of Heaven. They were even seriously injured by Ji Tianqing. This guy is not only powerful but also scheming. He is really not easy to deal with. However, I have come out personally and used the opportunity of paying respects to him. I have a good chance of winning. Now that he has accepted my goodwill, the first step of my plan has been completed. In the next few days, I will strike while the iron is hot. I will definitely succeed in getting the Sword of the Burial of Heaven. Speaking of this, Lu Li put on a sneer and squinted his eyes. He walked out of the reception hall and entered the heavily guarded study. About 7 minutes later, Steward Fang came back and reported to Lu Li in the study. Your Highness, I have made proper arrangements for Ji Tianqing. He has settled down and is resting. Lu Li nodded with satisfaction. He ordered Steward Fang, summon Jiang Ningxue to the study. I have something important to tell her. Steward Fang said yes and hurried out of the study to carry out the order. Lu Li sat in front of the spacious study table, sipping a cup of mystical tea. When he finished the cup of mystical tea, Steward Fang also brought Jiang Ningxue to the study. General Manager Fang tactfully retreated and closed the door. Only Lu Li and Jiang Ningxue were left in the study. Lu Li sat on the jade chair with a jade teacup in his hand. He turned around and looked at Jiang Ningxue. Jiang Ningxue was wearing a white dress. She stood in the study with elegance and dignity, looking straight into Lu Li's eyes. Her pair of eyes that were as clear as autumn water contained a faint trace of affection, as well as a bit of joy. Lu Li, didn't you tell me to cultivate in the Tower of Haotian and come to see me in 2 years? I have only been away for 2 months and you have come to the Mount of Canonization. Needless to say, Jiang Ningxue and Lu Li had known each other for a long time and their relationship was not simple. Lu Li nodded calmly. Pointing to the chair in front of him, he said in a low voice, Shuer, it is a long story. Come and sit down. Jiang Ningxue said yes. She walked over to the study table and sat down with dignity. Lu Li looked at her solemnly. After a sigh, he said, Shuer, I will not hide it from you. I am here at the Mount of Canonization because of my father's order. Saint Emperor's order. Jiang Ningxue was surprised. Seeing his serious expression, she asked with concern, Lu Li, what is it? Why are you so worried? Chapter 1524. The Sword of Burial of Heaven. Jiang Ningxue's body trembled. Her eyes were filled with shock. Are you talking about Kenshin's sword, the legendary #1 sword in the world? Yes. Lu Li nodded solemnly. Jiang Ningxue's pretty face was filled with disbelief. More than 1,000 years ago, Kenshin defeated all the heroes in the world with the Sword of Burial of Heaven. He even suppressed the 3 martial gods. Everyone knows about this. Of course, I have heard of Kenshin and the #1 sword. However, after Kenshin died, didn't the Sword of Burial of Heaven disappear without a trace? Lu Li nodded and explained, 1,000 years ago, the Sword of Burial of Heaven did disappear with Kenshin's death. However, the Sword of Burial of Heaven has reappeared in the world today. A lucky guy got the sword and came to the Clear Heaven Pagoda. That lucky guy is the #1 genius of the Outcloud Empire, Ji Tianqing. What? Jiang Ningxue was even more surprised. Her eyes were filled with disbelief. That cold and arrogant guy in a white robe? He offended the dignity of the Divine Master during the worship ceremony, causing great changes in heaven and earth. The Divine Master was furious. Before she could finish, Lu Li shook his head and said, "No one knows the exact reason for that matter. However, I think it has something to do with the Sword of Burial of Heaven. If not, how could that guy cause such a great change in heaven and earth with his strength and talent? As for the Divine Master being furious and causing great changes in heaven and earth and being struck by lightning, that's even more nonsense." Jiang Ningxue frowned and thought for a moment before she nodded and said, "I see. That's incredible. Lu Li, the Divine Emperor sent you to Mount God Ceiling for the Sword of Burial of Heaven?" "That's right." Lu Li nodded again and explained, "Saint Emperor received the news more than a month ago. He sent Division Leader Wang and Deacon Sun of the Martial League to hide at the foot of the Mount of Gods, waiting for an opportunity to assassinate Ji Tianqing and snatch the Sword of the Burial of Heaven. Unfortunately, their operation failed and they were seriously injured by Ji Tianqing. They fled back to the Empire in a sorry state." Jiang Ningxue was shocked once again. Her eyes were filled with disbelief. How is this possible? Those two were crossing Calamity Realm experts. How could they be injured by Ji Tianqing? I've seen Ji Tianqing before. He's clearly only at the 5th Firmament Essence Soul Realm. Could it be that the might of the Burial of Heaven sword injured Division Leader Wang and Deacon Sun? Exactly. Lu Li nodded slightly and said solemnly, "The Burial of Heaven is the #1 sword in the world. Its might is unparalleled. Anyone who can obtain it can find Kenshin's tomb and obtain Kenshin's supreme techniques and inheritance. Not only can they become an God of War expert, they can even break through the shackles of heaven and earth and ascend to the upper world. Therefore, the Divine Emperor gave a death order to obtain the Sword of the Burial of Heaven at all costs. For this, we can pay any price." Jiang Ningxue looked at him deeply and nodded, "Lu Li, I know you have great ambitions. I also believe that you will become an unparalleled expert. Since you have the Divine Emperor's order, I will do my best to help you achieve your wish." Lu Li was touched. He reached out to hold her white and tender hands, nodded and said, "Shuer, I know how you feel about me. If I can achieve my wish and successfully obtain the Sword of the Burial of Heaven, I can help Father break through to the God of War realm and become the 4th God of War in the world. In the future, I will also become the new Divine Emperor. By then, I will not let you down." Jiang Ningxue's glamorous face blushed slightly. Her eyes flickered with a hint of gratitude. Her bashful and timid look was even more beautiful than before, and it was enough to make one's heart drunk. But soon, she calmed down and asked Lu Li, "So, what is your plan? How can I help you?" Lu Li returned to his normal state. He said seriously, "So far, there are also people from the Empire of White Knight who know the news. They sent out 2 envoys to assassinate Ji Tianqing under the pretext of presenting the books as a tribute. Even though their plan failed, I believe that people from the Empire of White Knight will not give up. They will think of other ways. Therefore, we must make it quick and get the Sword of the Burial of Heaven as soon as possible in case of any undue delay. I have begged the chief guardian to transfer Ji Tianqing to the Hall of Tranquility. He is currently living in the hall. When the news spreads out, all the geniuses from different countries will understand that I am trying to win over Ji Tianqing and Ji Tianqing will accept it. This will not only drive a wedge between Ji Tianqing and the empire of Chu Yun, but also make it easier for me to carry out my plan. Jiang Ningxue nodded and said, during the worship ceremony, I have secretly observed that the geniuses of the empire of Chu Yun are not friendly to Ji Tianqing. Apart from a guy called Endless Void who is friends with Ji Tianqing, the others seem to be hostile to him. Now that Ji Tianqing has come to the Hall of Tranquility, people from the empire of Chu Yun will definitely work together to deal with him. Lu Li nodded with a smile and continued, driving a wedge between him and the empire of Chu Yun is only the first step of the plan. The second step is to get close to Ji Tianqing and find out where the sword of the burial of heaven is hidden. Shuer, I need your help on this matter. Ji Tianqing has a good impression of you. He seems to like you. I will arrange for you to stay with him so that you can get closer to him. What? Jiang Ningxue was stunned. She stared at Lu Li with her eyes wide open in disbelief. Her pretty face turned pale. Her eyes were filled with shock and disappointment. She could not believe that the crown prince who was graceful and gentle as jade in her mind would say something like this. Lu Li. You know that my heart belongs only to you. You want to send me to another man in order to complete the mission of the Holy Emperor. How can you do this? Jiang Ningxue's heart was filled with shame and disappointment. Her body was trembling. She stared at Lu Li as if she was trying to see through him. Lu Li did not feel embarrassed. He held her soft hands and explained in a gentle tone, Shuer, of course, I don't have the heart to hurt you, let alone give you away. But I am doing this for the sake of the big picture. Moreover, I've already tested Ji Tianqing. Although he's a cunning and scheming person, I've already tested him. But he is not a wretched and obscene person. He is a decent gentleman. He will not be rude to you. Shuer, for the sake of me and the future of the Empire of Thousand Snow, please bear with it for the time being. Lu Li looked at Jiang Ningxue with sincerity. His tone was sincere as well. Jiang Ningxue looked at him in silence. Her eyes kept changing. Many complicated thoughts flashed through her mind. After a long while, she put on a bitter sneer, nodded and said, You are the man I love. You are the son of the Holy Emperor. Fine, I'll agree to your request. Chapter 1525. Early the next morning, the sun had just risen. Ji Tianqing changed into a white robe with patterns of stars and clouds and a jade crown with the help of maids. After washing his face and rinsing his mouth, he walked out of the room and stood under the eaves of the door, observing the situation in the house. This was a yard in the depth of the palace. It was built in a magnificent manner and the environment was quiet and elegant. There were guards on all the roads and gates. There were more than a dozen young and beautiful maids in the hall. Lu Li is so sincere. Keeping me in the Hall of Tranquility is just the first step. He must have other plans and means. Ji Tianqing thought to himself. A glint of coldness rose in his eyes. Right at that moment, a crisp and pleasant voice of a lady came from next to him. Young Master Ji, how come you are in the mood to watch the sunrise so early in the morning? Hearing the voice, Ji Tianqing turned to the right. He saw a slim and graceful figure in a white dress standing under the eaves of the corridor. It was a young lady of about 20 years old. She was pure and beautiful. Her eyebrows were like mountains and her eyes were as clear as water. She was wearing a simple but elegant white dress and a pair of hairpins. She was dignified and graceful. She was a rare beauty. Ji Tianqing recognized her at once. She was the #1 genius of the Empire of Thousand Snow, Jiang Ningxue. Ji Tianqing was surprised. He raised his eyebrows and asked, Jiang Ningxue. What are you doing here? Jiang Ningxue put on a gentle smile. She walked to him and said in a gentle voice, "Young Master Ji, have you forgotten? I am a citizen of the Empire of Thousand Snow. Now that the Crown Prince has come to the Mount of Gods to pay his respects, I must come to pay my respects to him. Before the Crown Prince leaves the Mount of Gods, I will stay in the Hall of Tranquility for a few days. Coincidentally, my room is right next to young Master Ji's. Perhaps, this is fate." "Fate?" Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and said with a faint smile, "Maybe." He thought to himself, only a fool would believe this is fate. Last night, Lu Li said he wanted to set me up with Jiang Ningxue. This morning, Jiang Ningxue showed up in the room next to mine. How could Lu Li be so obvious? Jiang Ningxue noticed that he seemed to be lost in thought, so she took the initiative to say, "Young Master Ji, this is the first time we've come to Mount God Bestowment. We haven't walked around since we arrived. If young Master Ji doesn't mind, would young Master Ji accompany me for a stroll around the palace and enjoy the scenery?" As if she was afraid that Ji Tianqing would misunderstand, she added, "Early on during the worship ceremony, I paid close attention to you and was curious about you. Now that I finally have the opportunity to come into contact with you, it is my honor to be able to talk to you face to face. How can I refuse a beauty's invitation? Wouldn't it spoil the scenery?" Ji Tianqing nodded calmly and agreed to her request. Thus, the two of them walked side by side, casually strolling around the palace, chatting as they walked. Jiang Ningxue's appearance and temperament were outstanding. She also had a faint natural fragrance. Her breath smelled like orchids when she spoke. She and Ji Tianqing were close to each other, as if they were a couple who had fallen in love with each other. Her faint fragrance kept teasing Ji Tianqing's heart. If he were an ordinary young man, he would have been tempted by her. Even if he didn't take advantage of her, he would keep glancing at her curvaceous and graceful figure. However, Ji Tianqing remained calm and his eyes were clear. There was not a trace of distracting thoughts in his mind. Soon, 2 hours passed. Ji Tianqing and Jiang Ningxue walked around the Temple of Tranquility. They admired the 2 gardens and the crystal lake before returning to their residence. Ji Tianqing found some clues after spending 2 hours with her. While he was thinking, Jiang Ningxue also remained silent. She seemed to be absent-minded as if she had something on her mind. Based on Jiang Ningxue's expressions, reactions and some of her actions, Lu Li could tell that Jiang Ningxue was trying to please him, but in fact, she was resisting him. He immediately understood that Jiang Ningxue didn't want to please him, but she had to compromise because of Lu Li's order. Also, Jiang Ningxue was a dignified and graceful lady, unlike Lu Li who was cunning and couldn't hide his thoughts and secrets. Understanding this, Ji Tianqing decided to find a chance to test Jiang Ningxue further. The two of them returned to their residence and sat down to rest under a 1,000-year-old pine. The maids had already placed all kinds of fruits, pastries and tea on the stone table under the tree for them to enjoy. Jiang Ningxue sat in a dignified posture, holding a teacup and drinking tea. Ji Tianqing frowned and thought for a moment. Suddenly, he had an idea. He looked at Jiang Ningxue and said with a smile, "Lady Jiang, among the geniuses of the 6 states, you are one of the top 3. I admire you very much. Recently, when I was cultivating my swordsmanship, I encountered some bottlenecks and questions that I couldn't solve. Lady Jiang, please help me to see what is wrong with my swordsmanship and how I can break through the bottleneck." With that said, he took out a black sword from his interspatial ring before waiting for Jiang Ningxue's answer or not. This 1-meter-long black sword had an exquisite and gorgeous design. A lifelike black dragon was coiled around the hilt. The sword was emitting a sharp coldness. Clearly, it was a rare relic weapon in the world. After all, this was the black dragon sword that the little black dragon had transformed into. Ji Tianqing had just communicated with the little black dragon with his spiritual power and confirmed his plan. Holding the black dragon sword, he stood up and walked to the center of the yard, ready to display his swordsmanship. Jiang Ningxue, who had been absent-minded, suddenly saw the black dragon sword in his hand. She was refreshed and her eyes glowed. She tried her best to suppress the excitement in her heart. She pretended to be calm as she looked at Ji Tianqing and asked, "Young Master Ji, the sword in your hand is no ordinary item. It must be a peerless relic, right?" Jiang Ningxue's reaction made Ji Tianqing laugh inwardly. He was even more certain of his guess. He nodded at Jiang Ningxue and said with a proud expression, "Of course. If you want to become an expert in the way of the sword, you must have an extraordinary sword. And this sword in my hand is a divine weapon that is 1 in a million." Jiang Ningxue saw his proud expression and became even more anxious. She stared at the black dragon sword, almost unable to move her eyes away. "Young Master Ji, since this sword is so extraordinary, it must have a famous name, right?" Hearing this question, Ji Tianqing immediately frowned. He nodded with a strange expression and said, "Of course it has a name, but it's not famous. It's a little strange. This sword is called Burial of Heaven. This name is a little, sigh." When he said this, the voice of the Burial of Heaven suddenly sounded in his mind. It said with some displeasure, "Even if you want to put on an act, don't slander me, all right?" Ji Tianqing hurriedly transmitted his voice to persuade it, "Burial of Heaven. You just need to sleep and recuperate. Don't worry about these trivial matters." Chapter 1526. When Jiang Ningxue heard the words Burial of Heaven, her eyes lit up and her heart skipped a beat. Fortunately, she was calm and smart enough to not show any abnormalities on her face. Her expression was as calm as ever. However, Ji Tianqing was testing her on purpose. He had been observing the changes in her expression the whole time. Of course, he could tell that her emotions were surging and she was quite excited. Jiang Ningxue pretended to be confused and thought for a moment, then said, "Burial of Heaven? This name is a little strange, but it's very domineering. Young Master Ji, can you let me take a look at your Burial of Heaven?" On the surface, it seemed that she had never heard of the Burial of Heaven and was just curious. Ji Tianqing did not hesitate and handed the sword to her without hesitation. She quickly took it and held the black dragon sword with both hands. Her eyes were bright as she carefully observed it. She could tell that this sword was not only exquisite, but also contained a sense of antiquity. Especially the black dragon on the hilt. It was very lifelike, as if it was about to come to life. Most importantly, this sword was not an ordinary magic weapon. It was not a lifeless object. It actually had a soul and divine energy. It was like a sleeping divine dragon that could come to life at any time to tear the sky apart and soar through the 9 heavens. This feeling made Jiang Ningxue very certain that this was an extraordinary divine sword. It was very similar to the legendary Burial of Heaven. After a while, Jiang Ningxue was still holding the black dragon sword. She turned it over and over again, admiring it very much. Ji Tianqing saw that she was looking at it for a long time without saying anything, and had no intention of returning it. He asked, "Miss Jiang, what's wrong?" Jiang Ningxue finally came back to her senses. She smiled awkwardly and explained, "Young Master Ji's Burial of Heaven is indeed a peerless divine weapon. In all my life, I have never seen such a spiritual and extraordinary divine sword. I was so shocked that I lost my composure for a moment. I have made a fool of myself in front of young Master Ji." Ji Tianqing smiled and nodded. He said in a playful tone, "Since Miss Jiang likes this divine sword so much, I will reluctantly part with it and give it to you. What do you think?" Jiang Ningxue's body trembled. Her face was filled with joy as she stared at Ji Tianqing with sparkling eyes. She asked, "Young Master Ji, are you really willing to give me such a godly sword?" Ji Tianqing's smile became more and more playful. He nodded and said, "Of course I'm willing to part with a beauty like Miss Jiang, but I have a condition." Jiang Ningxue was too focused on obtaining the sword of burial of heaven to notice the teasing look in his eyes. She quickly asked, "What are your conditions, Mr. Ji?" "There's no harm in speaking." "Really?" Ji Tianqing looked at her with a smile and walked to her side. He leaned over and whispered in her ear. Hearing his conditions, Jiang Ningxue's delicate body trembled. Her body froze on the spot. When she came back to her senses, her face was red with embarrassment. Even her fair neck was covered in a layer of red. Her body was also trembling. She lowered her head, not daring to look Ji Tianqing in the eyes. She stood up with a flustered expression and quickly returned the sword of burial of heaven to Ji Tianqing. She then turned around and left in embarrassment and anger. Ji Tianqing looked at her back as she left in a hurry. The smile on his face became more and more playful. He asked in a loud voice, "Miss Jiang, do you agree or not? If you've made up your mind, come to my room tonight. We'll have a good talk again." Jiang Ningxue staggered and almost crashed into a pillar. The maids and guards around the courtyard all looked at her strangely when they heard Ji Tianqing's voice. She was instantly overwhelmed with shame and anger. She quickened her steps and ran through the corridor, leaving the courtyard as if she was escaping. After she left, Ji Tianqing put away the evil smile on his face, and his eyes regained their clarity and calmness. Since you are not a treacherous and fickle woman, why did you try to test me for Lu Li? I only tested you a little bit and you showed your true colors. Lu Li's honey trap seems to have collapsed by itself. Ji Tianqing put on a smile. After he went back to his room, he thought of another key issue. When I went to the foot of the mountain to receive tributes, 2 envoys of the White Knight Empire attacked me first. I injured them and they ran away. Then, 2 masked men in black showed up. They also wanted to take the sword of burial of heaven. Not long after that, Lu Li came to the Mount of Gods to pay his respects. He even asked the chief guardian to transfer me to the Hall of Tranquility. Lu Li tried his best to win me over. He even resorted to honey traps to let Jiang Ningxue get close to me to show his goodwill. Lu Li must be after the Heaven's Burier sword since he was willing to pay so much for it. Are the 2 masked men in black from the Empire of Thousand Snow? Previously, he had been wondering if the 2 groups of men who attacked him were from the Empire of White Knight. Now that Lu Li was trying so hard to please him, he understood that the second group of men in black might be from the Empire of Thousand Snow. On this thought, Ji Tianqing told himself that no matter what Lu Li was up to, he must be careful. It was late at night again. In a study room in the Hall of Tranquility, Lu Li was sitting in front of a desk. Jiang Ningxue in a white dress was sitting in front of him. She was reporting to him calmly. Lu Li, today, I approached Ji Tianqing on my own initiative. I spent half a day with him and I have found some clues. Hearing this, Lu Li was delighted. He asked at once, "Shuer, what did you find?" Jiang Ningxue said with relief, "I have gained his trust. Recently, he has reached a bottleneck in his cultivation of swordsmanship. He wanted to practice swordsmanship and asked me to give him some guidance. He took out a black sword called the Burial of Heaven. I have observed it carefully. There should be no mistake." Lu Li's eyes glowed. He became excited and eager. "Are you sure that is the Burial of Heaven? That's great. As the saying goes, even heroes fall for the charms of beautiful women. It seems that the beauty trap is the most effective. Shuer, since Ji Tianqing is willing to show you the Burial of Heaven, it means that he has a good impression of you and trusts you. You must strike while the iron is hot and find a way to get the Burial of Heaven." Speaking of this, Jiang Ningxue's expression became weird. She said with resentment, "That guy said that he is willing to give me the Burial of Heaven, but he has a condition." "What condition?" Lu Li asked in a hurry. "Did you agree?" Jiang Ningxue's face was cold. A glint of coldness flashed through her eyes. She said angrily, "That damn lecher, he wants me, to sleep with him for one night. Lu Li's expressions froze. He frowned with displeasure. But he thought to himself, damn that punk. He pretends to be a gentleman but he is such a pervert. Chapter 1527. Lu Li knew that Jiang Ningxue was deeply in love with him. Given Jiang Ningxue's status, family background, looks and talents, she was the best choice for him. However, compared to the best sword in the world, Jiang Ningxue was not so important. In his mind, how could a beautiful woman be more important than his future in martial arts? Jiang Ningxue saw that he was silent, as if he was considering something. She immediately became anxious, and the anger on her face became even more apparent. Lu Li, what are you thinking? Do you want me to agree to his rude terms? Jiang Ningxue thought that Lu Li would be as angry as she was and refuse the terms. However, Lu Li's reaction was as if he was weighing the pros and cons, considering whether to say yes or not. This made Jiang Ningxue feel even more indignant and disappointed. Her clear eyes were gradually covered with a layer of mist. Lu Li came back to his senses. He glanced at her and thought to himself, the burial of heaven is the best sword in the world. Ji Tianqing is neither a fool nor a lecher. How can he give away the burial of heaven so easily? Is he plotting something? Or does he not understand the value and significance of the burial of heaven? Lu Li looked at Jiang Ningxue and comforted her, "Shuer, don't worry. There are still many suspicious points. The black sword that Ji Tianqing took out, he said it was the sword of the burial of heaven. Tell me, what is that sword like?" Jiang Ningxue paused for a moment and thought of a possibility. She answered honestly, that sword is 1 meter long and 2 inches wide. It is pitch black and cold. There is a lifelike black dragon carved on the hilt. I have examined the sword carefully. It has a soul and strong fluctuation of divine energy. It is not an ordinary sword. After Lu Li heard this, he frowned. That sword is intact. There is a black dragon carved on the hilt. Yes. Jiang Ningxue nodded. Lu Li's expression changed. A cold glare flashed across his eyes. "Shuer, you have been fooled by Ji Tianqing. That is not the sword of burial of heaven. The real sword of burial of heaven had been severely damaged when Kenshin fell, and was now incomplete. With Ji Tianqing's strength, it was impossible for him to completely repair the sword of burial of heaven. Furthermore, the hilt of the burial of heaven doesn't have a black dragon engraved on it." Jiang Ningxue was trembling with anger. Her face turned pale as she felt even more ashamed and furious. "Damned lecher, you despicable bastard. He actually used a fake sword to impersonate the sword of the burial of heaven and tried to cheat me of my innocence." Lu Li waved his hand and comforted her, "Shuer, don't be so angry. It hasn't happened yet." Jiang Ningxue finally suppressed her hatred and anger. She frowned and asked, "If that is not the sword of the burial of heaven, why would Ji Tianqing use a fake sword to trick me?" Coldness surged in Lu Li's eyes as he said coldly, "Clearly, Ji Tianqing has become suspicious. He deliberately used a fake sword to impersonate the sword of the burial of heaven to test your reaction. Judging from all the signs, that guy is not simple. He must know the value and significance of the sword of the burial of heaven. He has become suspicious of our motives." Jiang Ningxue appeared to be worried. She asked, "Then what should we do? Should I continue to get close to him?" Lu Li thought about it and said calmly, "Of course, you have to stay in the Hall of Tranquility and continue to live next door to him. But you don't have to take the initiative to get close to him. Just let nature take its course. Even though he has become suspicious and we cannot get the sword of the burial of heaven for now, I still have a follow-up plan. I will take this opportunity to drive a wedge between him and the empire of Chu Yun. I will try my best to rope him into the empire of Thousand Snow. If my plan works and he can leave the Mount of Gods, then his life will no longer be in his hands." The sword of the burial of heaven will be mine. Hearing this, Jiang Ningxue understood what he meant. Lu Li could not take the sword of the burial of heaven by force on the Mount of Gods. Once Ji Tianqing left the Mount of Gods, Lu Li would not have to hide anymore. He could do whatever he wanted. Then, the two discussed some more matters and decided on their next plan. After about 7 minutes, Jiang Ningxue said goodbye to Lu Li and left the study. 3 days passed before they knew it. During the 3 days, Ji Tianqing had been cultivating in the yard of the Hall of Tranquility. Just as he expected, Jiang Ningxue still lived in the room next to his, but she never came to see him again. Sometimes, when they saw each other, Jiang Ningxue would turn around and leave with a cold face. Anger could be seen between her eyebrows. Ji Tianqing was not surprised by this outcome at all. After all, Jiang Ningxue was a beauty with both talent and beauty. She was not a scheming beauty. Of course, she would not throw herself at Lu Li for a sword. Geniuses had their dignity and pride. However, compared to the quietness of the Hall of Tranquility, the palace where the geniuses of the 6 states lived was bustling with noise and excitement. It was unknown who spread the news, but it spread among the geniuses of the 6 nations. Now, everyone knew that Ji Tianqing had turned to Lu Li, the crown prince of the Empire of Thousand Snow. He was living in the Hall of Tranquility. Lu Li was once a disciple of a god and was highly regarded by the 2 guardians and several envoys. Every few years, Lu Li would go back to the Mount of Gods to pay his respects. He respected his teacher and was very sincere to the immortal master. The geniuses of the various states were talking about how Ji Tianqing could be appreciated and valued by Lu Li. It was like a silver lining at the end of the tunnel. Even if he could not become a disciple of a god in the future, he could be cultivated by Lu Li and he could do well in the Empire of Thousand Snow. More than a dozen geniuses of the Chu Yun Empire were angry and contemptuous about Ji Tianqing turning to Lu Li. As far as they were concerned, Ji Tianqing was the #1 genius of the Chu Yun Empire. He had disgraced himself by ruining the worship ceremony. Now, he had turned to the crown prince of the Empire of Thousand Snow. How shameless! He had disgraced the Chu Yun Empire. If it were not for the fact that it was inconvenient for them to go to the Hall of Tranquility, they would have reprimanded Ji Tianqing in person. Apart from this, some insiders said that Lu Li had begged the chief guardian to give Ji Tianqing another chance. When the 7 days were up, Lu Li would bring Ji Tianqing with him when he went to the temple to pay his respects. As long as Ji Tianqing bowed to the temple devoutly and repented sincerely, the anger of the chief guardian could be appeased. By that time, Lu Li could put in a good word for Ji Tianqing to the chief guardian. Maybe he could be exempted from punishment. When the geniuses of various states learned about this, they were all criticizing secretly. They were waiting for Lu Li to go to the temple to pay his respects so that they could see Lu Li and Ji Tianqing with their own eyes. Soon, the 7 days were up. Today was the day Lu Li would go to the temple to pay his respects. Early in the morning, the maids and guards in the Hall of Tranquility were busy. There was a hubbub of voices. Chapter 1528. In the Hall of Tranquility. In the spacious yard, more than 40 guards and maids were lined up in neat rows, looking solemn and dignified. They were all elites selected from the honor guard, qualified to accompany Lu Li to the temple to worship the immortal Lord. In addition, Jiang Ningxue and several geniuses of the Thousand Snow Empire were standing in front of the team. Everyone stood in the yard, waiting quietly. Lu Li was not present. At the moment, he was leading Chief Steward Fong to the yard where Ji Tianqing lived. Arriving at the yard, Lu Li stood under the ancient pine in the yard and waited. Chief Steward Fong walked to Ji Tianqing's room and shouted respectfully, "Young Master Ji, the time is up. You should go to the temple with the crown prince." The door was still closed. Ji Tianqing's voice came from inside. "Crown Prince Lu is going to worship the immortal Lord. As a sinner, I will not join in the fun in case there is another disturbance. Hearing this, both Chief Steward Fong and Lu Li frowned. Lu Li waved his hand to signal Chief Steward Fong to leave. He said in person, "Young Master Ji, what do you mean? Didn't we agree on this before? Now that the time is up, you don't want to go. Are you trying to embarrass me on purpose?" As soon as he finished speaking, the door creaked open. Ji Tianqing stepped out and looked at Lu Li with a playful smile. He explained, "Crown Prince Lu, you have misunderstood. Since I have promised you, I will not go back on my words. I am just reminding Crown Prince Lu that it is best to think carefully before you make a decision, in case there is another accident." He and Lu Li both knew that today's matter would attract the attention and discussion of the geniuses of the 6 states. It was inevitable that something would go wrong. Lu Li was stunned. He smiled and said, "As long as young Master Ji is sincere in repentance, what accident can happen? Also, since I dared to invite young Master Ji to worship in the temple, I have thought it through." Sincere in repentance. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows and a playful smile appeared on his face. Others might not know, but he knew very well that he did not do anything wrong. Why should he go to the temple to repent? He had never done anything wrong, so how could he repent and turn over a new leaf? The reason why he agreed to go to the temple with Lu Li to worship the immortal master was that he had other intentions. Ever since the great changes in the world and the incident of the divine thunder, he had been harboring many doubts in his heart. He pondered for a long time, but he still couldn't figure it out. Why did the scene of Kenshin and martial god Taihao sparring appear in his soul when he entered the temple and saw the statue of divine Lord Taihao? Why did the great guardian tie him to the stone pillar and whip him? Why did the entire Mount of Gods shake and even thunder strike him? Was it because of the sword of burial of heaven, or because he looked like Kenshin? Or was it because of the Kenshin tomb in his body? He had always wanted to figure out the relationship between him and the Kenshin. He wanted to go to the temple again to see if there would be another great change in the world. Would the statue of divine Lord Taihao be worthy of his worship? With so many questions in mind, Ji Tianqing followed Lu Li out of the yard and into the front yard. Lu Li was at the front of the group, followed by Ji Tianqing, Jiang Ningxue and Chief Steward Fong. Behind them were the maids and guards. They walked out of the Hall of Tranquility in a formidable array and walked toward the temple under the Tower of Clear Heaven. The sun had just risen. The faint golden sunlight shone on the peak of the Mount of Gods, illuminating all the buildings. The sea of clouds around the peak was also suffused with a golden glow. It was an auspicious sight. For Lu Li, this was a good omen, which made him feel relaxed and happy. Soon, they arrived at the plaza outside the temple. This spacious plaza was destroyed by the great changes in the world and the divine thunder, turning into a pile of ruins. Later, the powerful warriors and craftsmen of the Tower of Clear Heaven restored the plaza to its original state in just one day. At the moment, more than 100 young talents of the 6 states were gathered in the plaza. Seeing Lu Li and the others walking over, many of them looked up and sized up Lu Li, Ji Tianqing and the others with mixed feelings. Most people's gazes were focused on Ji Tianqing. They wanted to see what this guy looked like after all the troubles he had caused. The geniuses of the Outcloud Empire also stared at Ji Tianqing with disdain and anger. They whispered to each other. Lu Li ignored the onlookers. He led the group through the plaza and was about to enter the temple. The chief guardian and the 6 messengers had been waiting in the temple for a long time. As soon as he arrived, the ceremony could be held and the worship could begin. However, when the team was about to cross the plaza, more than a dozen young geniuses stood in front of the team, blocking their way. These young geniuses were all from the Outcloud Empire. Their leaders were Lan Yiqing and Kuang Long. Lu Li stopped at once. He frowned and asked in a deep voice, "What are you doing?" As the representative of the Outcloud Empire, Lan Yiqing stepped forward, cupped his fists to Lu Li and explained, "Prince Lu, we do not mean to offend you and we will not stop you from worshipping the immortal Lord. However, there is a shameless traitor in the Outcloud Empire who has disgraced our nation. As citizens of the Outcloud Empire, we cannot sit by and do nothing. We must stop this traitor and make him give a reasonable explanation. Lan Yiqing's cold words spread throughout the square. The scene instantly quieted down, and the atmosphere became somewhat heavy and tense. The young talents from the other states quickly retreated to the sides of the plaza, waiting to see a good show. They all knew that the traitor Lan Yiqing mentioned was Ji Tianqing. The geniuses of the Outcloud Empire were going to make things difficult for Ji Tianqing. Everyone was looking at Ji Tianqing with interest, waiting to see how he would explain and how he could resolve the situation. Lu Li was trying his best to win over Ji Tianqing to sow discord between Ji Tianqing and the Outcloud Empire. The news that the geniuses of other states learned was released by Lu Li on purpose. Now, Lan Yiqing and the others showed up to stop Lu Li, which was within Lu Li's expectation. Lu Li thought to himself, the plan is going well. Everything is going according to my plan. Now that the Outcloud Empire is making things difficult in public, it is a good chance for me to win over Ji Tianqing. On this thought, Lu Li looked at Lan Yiqing coldly and sneered, "Ha, ha. Lady Lan, you can eat whatever you want but you can't say whatever you want. People around me are my friends and citizens of the Thousand Snow Empire. How can I be a traitor?" Lan Yiqing didn't argue with him. She stared at Ji Tianqing coldly and shouted with contempt, "Ji Tianqing, you have the guts to betray the Outcloud Empire but you don't have the guts to admit it?" Chapter 1529. Lan Yiqing's attitude was tough and her words were harsh. She was smart enough to not argue with Lu Li. That would be a waste of time. She directly called out Ji Tianqing. She would not offend Lu Li too much and at the same time, she could put Ji Tianqing in a passive and awkward situation. As long as Ji Tianqing still had his dignity and character, he would not turn a deaf ear to it. He would step forward bravely. Young talents from different countries were looking at Lan Yiqing with new eyes. They had different opinions about her. This girl is so scheming. Ji Tianqing is going to be embarrassed. This Lan Yiqing is calm and wise. Her means are sharp. She has pointed out the core of the problem. No wonder after Ji Tianqing was punished, she has become the role model of the Chu Yun Empire. We cannot underestimate this girl. We must be careful of her in the future. Lan Yiqing couldn't help but sneer when she saw that people were whispering and pointing at Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing, do you think you can turn over a new leaf just because you have Lu Li as your backer? Don't even think about it. I will not let you go to the temple to repent and turn over a new leaf. If you take this chance to please the chief guardian and avoid punishment, you will become my stumbling block in the future. Beside her, Quan Long and the more than a dozen young talents sneered as well. They looked at Ji Tianqing with contempt. For a moment, Ji Tianqing became the focus of attention. He was pushed to the teeth of the storm. But he had expected that Lan Yiqing and the others would stir up trouble, so he was prepared. He walked out of the crowd calmly and stood in front of Lan Yiqing with a sneer of disdain. I don't belong to any force. How can I betray you? You should keep the word traitor to yourself. Lan Yiqing and Quan Long's expressions changed. They frowned and the contempt on their faces grew. What a shameless guy. Lan Yiqing scolded coldly, Ji Tianqing, don't forget that you are the #1 genius of the Chu Yun Empire. Now, you've sided with the crown prince of the Thousand Snow Empire. If this isn't betrayal, then what is? Ji Tianqing also frowned and said contemptuously, Lan Yiqing, are you deaf, or are you out of your mind? I've already made myself clear. Do you still not understand? Although I came to the vast heaven pagoda with the identity of the Outcloud Empire's #1 genius, I'm not a member of the Outcloud Empire. Who I want to be with is my personal matter. What does it have to do with you? Yi Qingtang thought. Who the hell are you? Are you qualified to tell me what to do? The cold and majestic voice spread throughout the entire square. The geniuses from various countries were all shocked as they looked at Ji Tianqing in disbelief. No one would have thought that he would say such arrogant words, and even scold Lan Yiqing so badly. Lan Yiqing was so angry that she glared at him. She pointed at him and said, "You," 3 times, but could not find a word to refute. Quan Long and the other young geniuses were also furious. They looked at Ji Tianqing as if they were going to spit fire. However, like Lan Yiqing, they had seen Ji Tianqing participate in the ranking battle with their own eyes. At that time, Ji Tianqing's style of dress was completely different from the people of the Chu Yun Empire. Even his speech and accent were very awkward. Everyone knew that Ji Tianqing was indeed not a member of the Chu Yun Empire. However, Lan Yiqing was furious. She had not achieved her goal, so how could she back down? She pointed at Ji Tianqing and shouted coldly, "Ji Tianqing, if it weren't for the special care of Saint Emperor Chu Yun, how could you become the #1 genius of the Chu Yun Empire? Now that you want to join the Qianchu Empire, how could you say such heartless words? Saint Emperor Chu Yun will not let you go." Quan Long and the other young geniuses nodded in agreement while cursing furiously. Ji Tianqing stared at Lan Yiqing coldly and scolded contemptuously, "I became the #1 genius of the Chu Yun Empire because of my strength. I used my real strength to defeat all of you trash, not because of anyone's special care. As for whether the great Emperor Chu Yun will let me go, what does that have to do with you? Who do you think you are to represent the great Emperor Chu Yun? I'm warning you one last time, don't tell me what to do. Take your claws away, or I don't mind crippling them." Such arrogant words made Lan Yiqing, Quan Long, and the other geniuses turn pale and tremble. He dared to say such arrogant words in front of the geniuses of the 6 countries. He was too arrogant. However, his aura was majestic, and his entire body emitted an incomparably domineering aura. Every word he spoke was like muffled thunder that fiercely shook the hearts of everyone present. Lan Yiqing was shocked and angry. He was so angry that he almost vomited blood. His face was livid. "Ji Tianqing, you will definitely pay for what you've said today." She glared at Ji Tianqing with a face full of hatred. After leaving behind some harsh words, she turned around and left. She wanted to use today's opportunity to humiliate Ji Tianqing in public and stop him from going to the temple. She didn't expect things to turn out this way. Not only did her plan fail, but she was also scolded by Ji Tianqing in public. She was humiliated. The more she thought about it, the more ashamed she became. She was so angry that she spat out a mouthful of blood. Quan Long and the other young geniuses quickly surrounded her and retreated to the edge of the square to comfort her. However, there was still one person standing in front of Lu Li and Ji Tianqing. He was in a white robe. Even though he was a man, he was as beautiful as a woman. His temperament was feminine and charming. Without a doubt, he was Yin Wu Quebec. Although he was also in the crowd just now, he didn't say anything from the beginning to the end, nor did he slander Ji Tianqing. At the moment, he was looking at Ji Tianqing with mixed feelings. He secretly sent a message, "Young Master Ji, I didn't expect that things would turn out this way. No matter what, I must remind you that Lu Li is a cunning and scheming man. He will do anything to achieve his goals. Even if you are in trouble, you should not follow him. He is not a wise leader." Ji Tianqing also looked at him with a deep gaze, sending him a message, "Thank you for your concern and reminder. I have my reasons and plans for doing this. Also, I don't belong to any force and I will not submit to anyone. Even if the Holy Emperor of Thousand Snow was here, he could not make me submit to him, let alone Lu Li." Hearing Lu Li's words, the worry in Yin Wu Kei's eyes disappeared. He nodded slightly to Ji Tianqing and transmitted his voice to him, "I didn't misjudge you. You are still arrogant and proud as always. However, I was born in the Chu Yun Empire. My family and friends are all in the Chu Yun Empire. Therefore, I am unable to stand up and support you. Please forgive me." Chapter 1530. Yin Wukei's eyes were clear as he stared at him. His lips curled into a smile. He and Ji Tianqing looked at each other for a while before Yin Wuk turned around and went back to the crowd. The disturbance caused by Lan Yiqing and the others was resolved by Ji Tianqing. His confidence and dominance left a deep impression on the talents from different countries. Once again, Yin Wuk had become the focus of discussion. Lu Li looked at Ji Tianqing and then at Lan Yiqing and the others at the edge of the plaza. A glint of disappointment and disdain rose in his eyes. He had thought that Lan Yiqing and the others could embarrass Ji Tianqing and put him in a humiliating position. By then, Lu Li would step in to solve the dispute and help Ji Tianqing out of the crisis. Lu Li was sure that he would be appreciated by Ji Tianqing. Little did he expect that Ji Tianqing could solve the problem with only a few words. He even made Lan Yiqing spit out blood and almost went on a rampage. Lu Li's plan had failed. He couldn't help but curse, "I am so disappointed in the Chu Yun Empire." Of course, Lu Li had to act as if nothing had happened. He led the others through the plaza and into the temple. At the gate of the temple, the more than 40 maids and escorts stayed outside and knelt in the corridor with respect. As servants, it was already a great honor for them to be able to come to the temple. They were not qualified to enter the hall. Only Ji Tianqing, Jiang Ningxue and several talents from the Empire of Thousand Snow followed Lu Li into the hall. In the splendid hall, Chief Guardian stood in front of the statue of the Immortal. The 6 messengers stood on both sides of the statue. Just like the previous ones, this worship ceremony was hosted by Chief Guardian. He held a book of laws in his hands and stood in front of the statue solemnly. He looked at Lu Li and the others with dignity. Lu Li led Ji Tianqing and the others to the center of the hall and bowed to the Chief Guardian and the messengers. "Greetings, Chief Guardian and messengers." Ji Tianqing didn't react. He didn't bow or say anything. He looked at the wall behind the Divine Master's statue, observing the murals and symbols. Meanwhile, he could not help but recall some scenes related to martial god Taihao deep in his mind. Those were Kenshin's memories, but they were scattered and fragmented. Fortunately, he didn't lose focus. His eyes were still clear and calm. Seeing that he did not bow, the great guardian was a little displeased, and his eyes turned cold. However, he suppressed the dissatisfaction in his heart and ignored Ji Tianqing. In his mind, Ji Tianqing's disrespect towards him was nothing, but disrespect towards Divine Lord Taihao was a heinous crime. He held the codex in his hands and announced in a solemn tone, "I declare that the worship ceremony will now begin." Then, with a solemn tone, he began to recite the profound and obscure divine scriptures. His right hand slowly waved as he performed a mysterious seal. "Everything is born without a beginning, there is a beginning and there is an end. Nothing is wrong, nothing is thought." As the solemn voice of the Chief Guardian echoed in the hall, Lu Li dropped to his knees with respect and kowtowed to the statue. His expression and posture were full of reverence and devotion. After 3 kowtows, he stood up, took 3 steps forward, and kowtowed 3 more times. Then, he walked toward the Divine Master's statue step by step, kneeling every 3 steps and kowtowing every 9 steps. It was truly 3 kneels and 9 kowtows. Jiang Ningxue and the other geniuses of the Empire of Thousand Snow did the same. They knelt and kowtowed to the Divine Master's statue with utmost devotion. Only Ji Tianqing remained standing in the middle of the hall. He neither knelt nor kowtowed. His dignity and pride made it impossible for him to kowtow to the Divine Master's statue like Lu Li and the others. He only bowed to the Divine Master's statue. This was the greatest sincerity he could show. The Chief Guardian was still reciting the divine scriptures when he saw Ji Tianqing standing out from the crowd. Lu Li, Jiang Ningxue and the others were all on their knees, but he was the only one standing upright. He was too conspicuous. The chief protector immediately stopped chanting when he saw this. He furrowed his brows as anger surged through his eyes. He never expected that after what happened last time, Ji Tianqing would not learn his lesson. He even dared to offend the Divine Master's dignity. He gave Ji Tianqing a chance to turn over a new leaf for Lu Li's sake. He never expected that Ji Tianqing would still have such an attitude. How could he not be angry? Ji Tianqing, I have shown you mercy and given you a chance to come to the temple to worship and repent. How dare you not kneel? The chief guardian glared at Ji Tianqing and scolded him coldly. The messengers, Lu Li and the others were all startled. They all turned to Ji Tianqing. Everyone stared at him with shocked and puzzled expressions. Nobody could understand why this guy refused to repent. The statue enshrined in the temple was the supreme martial god Taihao. Was this guy stupid? Why wouldn't he kneel and worship the Divine Master's statue? If someone's attitude was pious, they might be able to gain the Divine Master's favor and receive the Divine Master's enlightenment and rewards. At this moment, a sudden cry of surprise broke the silence of the temple. Heavens! Everyone, look! The Divine Master's statue is showing an oracle. Hearing this, everyone was taken aback. Their eyes were dazed and they could not react in time. A moment later, everyone came to their senses and turned to look at the Divine Master's statue. The majestic and dignified Divine Master's statue lit up with a dazzling golden light. It was incomparably sacred. On the pedestal at the foot of the statue was a white jade slab, 2 meters wide and 10 meters long. It also lit up with a white light. This jade slab was part of the pedestal and was used for decoration and embellishment. At the same time, this jade slab was a piece of divine jade that could communicate with the Divine Master. It had a special function, which was to show the Divine Master's oracle. When a peerless expert or genius worshipped the Divine Master's statue, if they could gain the Divine Master's favor, the jade slab would light up and show different oracles. Some oracles were to enlighten believers. Some oracles were to give orders. For nearly 1,000 years, only a few people received oracles when they worshipped the Divine Master's statue. Those few people were the saint emperors of several large empires and the great protector of the past. Back then, the great protector was also a peerless genius of his generation. With his abyss body, his name shook the world. When he worshipped the Divine Master's statue, he gained the Divine Master's favor and triggered an oracle. Later, he was nurtured into a warrior saint expert and was highly regarded by the Divine Master. He was appointed as the great protector of the clear heaven pagoda. Now, the oracle had come again. The great protector, the 6 messengers, Lu Li, Jiang Ningxue, and the others all showed excited expressions. Lu Li, in particular, was so excited that his face was flushed. He hurriedly kowtowed 9 times to the Divine Master's statue and laughed excitedly. Chapter 1531. Everyone understood that a person that could trigger an oracle must have received the Master of God's favor and attention. Such a person would either be a powerful warrior like the 6 holy emperors or a peerless genius that could become a powerful warrior of the holy emperor level in the future. Today was the day that Lu Li paid homage to the Master of God. Not only was Lu Li devoted to the Master of God, but he was also a gifted warrior. Almost everyone was convinced that the oracle was given to Lu Li by the Master of God. The several messengers were looking at Lu Li with gratification and applauding him. This is great. Lu Li's devotion has moved the Master of God. For decades, we have seen with our own eyes that Lu Li would come back to pay homage to the Master of God every 2 years to thank the Master of God for his cultivation. He deserves it. When Lu Li was still an apprentice, we all thought highly of him and believed that he would achieve great things in the future. It seems that we are right. Right. The Master of God has given us an oracle. This is his acknowledgement of Lu Li. Chief Guardian was so happy that he even forgot about Ji Tianqing's disrespect to the Master of God. Looking at Lu Li with glowing eyes, Chief Guardian exclaimed, "Lu Li, I have always seen your talent and your devotion to the Master of God and I approve of it. Now, you have finally won the Master of God's favor and the oracle is here. You have achieved something. I am happy for you and I am proud of you. Lu Li had become the center of attention. Being praised by the chief guardian and several messengers, he was so excited that his heart was pounding. He had been waiting for this day for hundreds of years. In order to win the Master of God's favor, he had done everything he could. Now, his wish had finally come true. He was so happy and excited that he almost jumped to his feet. That being said, he tried his best to suppress his excitement. He remained humble and courteous. He bowed to the chief guardian and the messengers and expressed his gratitude in a dignified manner. Jiang Ningxue and the other geniuses of the Empire of Thousand Snow were looking at Lu Li with admiration and admiration. For them, this was a dream that was out of their reach. They were excited and proud that Lu Li had been acknowledged by the Master of God. However, right when everyone was filled with excitement and revelry, a voice that was filled with bewilderment resounded once more in the hall. Why is the Divine Master's oracle a little strange? The hall instantly quieted down. Everyone stopped smiling and turned to look at Lin Daoi. He was the first one to notice the arrival of the oracle. Now, it was him again. After carefully examining the oracle, he asked this question. Everyone looked at the jade slab at the base of the statue. On the white jade slab, there were 2 lines of golden words. When I first entered the conferred God's land, I was struck by lightning from the 9 heavens. When the day comes, I'll break the secrets of heaven with a single sword. The years passed without a trace, the affairs of the world reincarnated into another epoch. Even now, I still think of the 9 heavens beyond, destroying the Milky Way and breaking spacetime with my palm. Previously, when everyone saw the white light flickering on the jade board, they only knew that the Divine Lord's oracle had arrived. Because of this, they cheered and jumped for joy. No one carefully read the contents of the oracle. Now, they stared at the 2 lines of words. After reading it 2 or 3 times, they all frowned in confusion. Not only did the chief guardian and the 6 emissaries find it strange, but even Jiang Ningxue and the several geniuses of the Empire of Thousand Snow were suspicious. They secretly observed Lu Li's expression. Lu Li stared at the 2 lines of golden words. The excitement and ecstasy in his heart disappeared without a trace. He was filled with confusion, disappointment, and unwillingness. He pressed his lips together and said nothing. Anyone could see that the first sentence of the oracle excluded Lu Li from the list. When he first entered the conferred God's land, he was struck by lightning from the 9 heavens. This clearly meant that the one favored by the Divine Lord had just entered the Mount of Conferred Gods and he had attracted lightning from the 9 heavens. When the day comes, I'll break the secrets of heaven with a single sword. This implied that the Divine Lord thought highly of this person. This person was talented and had unlimited potential. In the future, he would become a powerful warrior who could break the secrets of heaven with a single sword. As for the second paragraph, no one could understand it. For example, the words, time of ages, reincarnation after reincarnation, beyond the 9 heavens, destroy galaxies, and break time and space, were even more confusing. The Divine Lord's oracle was strange. No one knew who it was referring to. The chief guardian, the 6 emissaries, Lu Li and the others were all silent. They frowned and discussed in confusion. Ji Tianqing was the only one in the hall. After a moment of thought, he put on a smile. He put his hands behind his back and stared at the statue of the Divine Lord with glowing eyes. He murmured to himself, it seems that the changes in heaven and earth and the thunderbolts were not coincidences. Martial God Taihao has sensed my existence and he thinks that I am Kenshin. That is why he sent down this oracle. Time of ages left no trace. Reincarnation after reincarnation. Even now, he still thinks about beyond the 9 heavens, destroying galaxies and breaking time and space. Martial God Taihao is talking about Kenshin, isn't he? Or perhaps, he intentionally said these words in order to test if I'm the reincarnation of the sword god. Thinking of this, he finally understood the reason for the disturbance. The smile on his face grew wider. The chief guardian and the 6 emissaries were discussing telepathically, trying to figure out the meaning of the oracle. Suddenly, he glanced at Ji Tianqing. Seeing Ji Tianqing's smiling face, the chief guardian frowned and shouted, "Ji Tianqing. What are you laughing at? This is a sacred temple. How dare you be disrespectful to the Divine Lord?" The cold and angry shout interrupted everyone's thoughts. Everyone's gazes gathered on Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing did not restrain himself. Instead, the smile on his face grew wider. He said in a playful tone, "I am laughing at someone who thinks he is infallible and misinterprets the Divine Lord's oracle. Making such a joke is disrespectful to the Divine Lord, isn't it?" The chief guardian was rendered speechless. His old face turned red. But he maintained his dignified look and shouted, "The Divine Lord's oracle is of course unfathomable and contains heaven's secrets. It is normal that mortals like us cannot understand it. How can it be a joke?" Ji Tianqing stared at him and said with a smile, "Everyone is cheering and celebrating before they can see the oracle clearly. What is this if not a joke?" The chief guardian and the emissaries blushed at the sarcasm. They were embarrassed and ashamed. Lu Li, Jiang Ningxue and the others were so ashamed that they wished they could find a hole to hide in. Seeing that the chief guardian was speechless, Ji Tianqing continued, "Is the oracle really that hard to understand? I don't think so. Just entering the apotheosized land and being struck by lightning." "Ha, ha." He sneered and glanced at the chief guardian and the emissaries. Then, he turned around and walked out of the hall. Everyone looked at his back and suddenly thought of something. Their expressions changed drastically. Lin Doi exclaimed in disbelief, "I understand now. The oracle is talking about Ji Tianqing." Chapter 1532. Even if Lin Doi did not remind, the majority of the people present also guessed the answer. That Divine Master's oracle was absolutely not bestowed to Lu Li. It was talking about precisely Ji Tianqing. After all, there was a sentence in the oracle, "First enter God's sealing mountain, be struck by divine lightning of the 9 heavens." Looking at the past 1,000 years, only Ji Tianqing alone could cause such a commotion. It was just that everyone subconsciously believed that Ji Tianqing had offended the Divine Master's majesty before. He was still a sinner right now, how could he possibly obtain the Divine Master's oracle? When the oracle descended, everyone's first reaction was Lu Li and would not consider Ji Tianqing at all. This was simply too preposterous. But the oracle still appeared clearly on the jade tablet. Who dared to question the Divine Master's oracle? The expressions of the chief protector and the few divine envoys all became very complicated. Before this, they did not take Ji Tianqing seriously and even somewhat loathed and hated him. In terms of strength, this guy could not rank in the top 5. In terms of talent, this guy was also very ordinary. Yet, this guy was arrogant and conceited, triggering a huge change in heaven and earth, causing God's sealing mountain to tremble and nearly causing a catastrophe. If not for Jiao coming forward to protect him, the chief protector would have long expelled him from the vast heaven pagoda. But now, this guy just bowed to the Divine Master's statue and obtained the Divine Master's favor, even showing the oracle. This was simply too inconceivable, too dreamy. The few divine envoys stared at the oracle and were still whispering to each other, discussing the meaning of the oracle. But the chief protector frowned, all sorts of thoughts currently flashing through his mind. No wonder His Highness Jiao would protect Ji Tianqing. It must be that His Highness saw through this boy's extraordinariness long ago and will obtain the Divine Master's favor. Previously, this seat was still planning to find a chance to expel him from God's sealing mountain in the future, to prevent him from wreaking havoc in the Holy Land again. But I didn't expect that he obtained the Divine Master's attention and favor. Looks like not only can this seat not expel him, but I also have to value and groom him even more, sigh. Thinking up to here, the chief protector sighed heavily in his heart, only feeling very vexed. Ji Tianqing was arrogant and did not put him in his eyes at all. However, he had to follow the Divine Lord's orders and try his best to cultivate Ji Tianqing. How could he not feel aggrieved? Lu Li's face was clouded with anger and shame. He secretly clenched his fists, and his eyes were filled with intense anger. Originally, today was his most glorious day. If it wasn't for Ji Tianqing, he would have been one of the lucky few who could obtain the oracle. His future achievements and status wouldn't be any worse than the 6 great holy emperors. But now, all the glory belonged to Ji Tianqing. He had become a complete joke. Ji Tianqing. You damned beast, this sovereign will definitely kill you and tear you to pieces. The incomparable humiliation and anger made him determined that as long as he had the chance, he would make Ji Tianqing die without a burial place. At the same time, in the square outside the temple, the geniuses from various countries hadn't left yet. They were gathered under a huge stone tablet, discussing excitedly. Just now, the black stone tablet that was more than 1,000 feet tall lit up with a dazzling white light, revealing 2 lines of golden words. The sudden change caused everyone to be filled with shock. They only felt that it was inconceivable. Some of the more knowledgeable geniuses immediately understood the meaning of the golden words and cheered excitedly. Oh my God! An oracle has come! This is incredible! Lu Li went to the Divine Lord today and was favored by the Divine Lord. An oracle has come! The exclamations and shouts of several young geniuses spread across the square. Like a stone that stirred up 1,000 ripples, the geniuses from various countries immediately understood that the golden words on the huge stone tablet were the legendary oracle. Everyone swarmed over and surrounded the stone tablet. They raised their heads to look at the dazzling golden oracle and let out cries of surprise as they discussed among themselves. This is incredible. I am lucky enough to see the oracle with my own eyes. I have heard a long time ago that only the emperors of various countries and the great guardians could receive the oracle when they went to the Divine Lord. I can't believe that Lu Li got one as well. I read in a book that in the past 1,000 years, only 4 people had received the oracle when they went to the temple to worship. Lu Li was once an apprentice and a talented martial arts genius. Every couple of years, he would come to the temple to worship. His pious worship must have moved the Divine Lord. That's why the Divine Lord cherished talents and gave him the oracle. Now, Lu Li is going to be famous and awe the 6 countries. He can be favored by the Divine Lord. In the future, he will be as successful as the holy emperors of various countries. Everyone's faces were filled with excitement, as well as intense envy and jealousy. Just as everyone was discussing animatedly, someone suddenly let out a cry of surprise. Look, why is that guy coming out? Many young geniuses turned to the gate of the temple. They saw a handsome man in a white robe walking out of the temple. Everyone was not unfamiliar with him and recognized him immediately. He was Ji Tianqing. Instantly, the gazes of the geniuses from various countries were gathered on him, revealing playful and mocking sneers. Strange, the worship ceremony is not over yet. Why did this kid come out in advance? Humph, the worship is not over and he dares to leave rashly. This is a great disrespect to the Divine Lord. Ji Tianqing is really unrepentant. Last time, he caused such a big disturbance. Today, he is disrespectful to the Divine Lord. I'm afraid he will be expelled from the vast heaven pagoda soon. Lu Li brought him to worship the Divine Lord. But when Lu Li got the oracle, he left in advance. How can the gap between people be so big? Lu Li is a dragon that soars in the 9 heavens, and this kid is a worm in the mud. What is he? How can he be mentioned in the same breath as Lu Li? The geniuses from all over the world were discussing without restraint. They were all gloating and laughing without restraint. Among the crowd, Lan Yiqing, Guanglong, and the geniuses from the rising cloud empire stared at Ji Tianqing, smiling happily as if their hatred had been vented. Ha, ha, ha. Ji Tianqing must be kicked out. Right. He is disrespectful to the Divine Lord. He has no right to enter the temple to worship. It is only natural that he is kicked out. It is funny that this guy wants to ride on Lu Li's coattails. Lu Li got the oracle and sword while he ran away with his tail between his legs. How ironic. Of all the people present, the ones from the rising cloud empire were the happiest to see Ji Tianqing. As far as they were concerned, the more humiliated Ji Tianqing was, the more satisfied they would be. In the time for 10 breaths, Ji Tianqing walked across the plaza and arrived in front of the crowd. He glanced at the oracle on the stone tablet. He wanted to leave and go back to the vast heaven pagoda. However, the geniuses from various countries did not shy away from laughing and talking about him with contempt. Chapter 1533. Today, the young geniuses of the Outcloud Empire were here to humiliate Ji Tianqing. Lan Yiqing had led the young geniuses to stop Ji Tianqing from going to the temple to worship. Instead, Ji Tianqing was angered to the point of vomiting blood. Now that Ji Tianqing had been kicked out of the temple, she would not let go of this chance to humiliate Ji Tianqing. The young geniuses stood in a row in front of Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing stopped. He looked at Lan Yiqing and the others with a straight face and said coldly, "Good dogs don't block the way. If you know what's good for you, piss off." As soon as he spoke, Lan Yiqing and the others were livid with rage. Their eyes were burning with rage. Lan Yiqing sneered and said with contempt, "Ji Tianqing. How dare you be so arrogant under these circumstances? You are courting death." Guanglong also grinned and sneered, "Ha, ha, you have no shame in betraying your own country. You want to curry favor with Lu Li of the Empire of Thousand Snow. You are willing to be his lackey. What is the result? He worships the Immortal Lord and is favored by the Immortal Lord. Now, you are kicked out of the temple. You don't even have the right to worship the Immortal Lord." Ji Tianqing's eyes grew cold. There was a glint of coldness in his eyes. He put on a meaningful sneer. He glanced over to Guanglong, Lan Yiqing and the young geniuses of the Outcloud Empire and said in a low voice, "You think the Immortal Lord gave the oracle to Lu Li and I was kicked out of the temple? So, you bunch of clowns can't wait to jump out and humiliate me?" The young geniuses let out disdainful smirks. "Of course. You're the one humiliating me, you traitor. Ha, 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 at least you know your place. Ji Tianqing, you have been expelled from the Outcloud Empire. You don't deserve to be a citizen of our country. Traitor. Kneel down and admit your sins." The geniuses of the Chu Yun Empire had the advantage in numbers, and Ji Tianqing had been chased out of the temple. Under such circumstances, the geniuses were naturally arrogant and wanted to take the opportunity to humiliate him, ruthlessly trampling on his dignity in front of the geniuses of the 6 nations. Ji Tianqing suddenly smiled. He was so angry that he laughed. His entire body erupted with soaring battle intent. His incomparably powerful aura was like an invisible mountain that pressed down on everyone. "You bunch of clowns dare to point fingers in front of me? I've already warned you before. Since you insist on seeking death, I'll grant you your wish." He roared with a domineering aura, and his entire body lit up with a golden light that soared into the sky. His body also suddenly grew to a height of more than 10 meters, turning into a majestic giant. "All of you, get down." Amidst his furious roar, he suddenly waved his palms and fiercely slapped at the 3 young geniuses in front of him. Heaven-seizing palm. The 3 of them were sneering and mocking him when suddenly, 2 giant golden palms descended from the sky with a force that could destroy heaven and earth. The 3 of them instantly froze, and their eyes widened in horror. They had never imagined that Ji Tianqing would actually be so arrogant, attacking at the slightest disagreement. The power of the giant golden palms was too terrifying, and the speed of the attack was also extremely fast. Before they could react, they were hit by the giant golden palms. Bam! Bam! A deafening muffled sound suddenly exploded in the square. Two giant pits were formed on the hard and sturdy stone ground. The three young geniuses of the Chu Yun Empire were lying in the ruins, covered in blood, and had already fainted. The sudden upheaval left everyone in the square dumbfounded. The geniuses of the various nations had an incredulous expression as they looked at Ji Tianqing with astonishment and exclaimed, "Oh my God! Is this guy crazy? He wants to become enemies with more than 10 geniuses of the Chu Yun Empire. He actually dares to injure other geniuses outside the temple. He's really lawless. This guy is finished. No one dares to cause trouble on Mount God Bestowment. He's dead meat. Heh heh, the people of the Chu Yun Empire are actually fighting among themselves outside the temple. What a joke." The young geniuses of the various nations quickly retreated to the edge of the square and watched the battle calmly, as if they were waiting for a good show. Song Zhanyu, who was in the crowd, stared deeply at Ji Tianqing and sneered. "Humph! This guy is really arrogant. He actually dares to fight more than 10 young geniuses in front of everyone. That's good. I can see how strong he is. Perhaps he will even use the legendary Sword of Burial of Heaven." At the same time, Lan Yiqing, Quan Long, and the others, who were inexplicably shocked, finally came to their senses. They looked at the deep pit in front of them and their three companions at the bottom of the pit. They were instantly furious and roared angrily. "Ji Tianqing! How dare you make a move outside the divine hall? You traitor! How dare you attack your own countrymen? You're heartless. Ji Tianqing, don't blame us for bullying you because we outnumber you. Today, we're going to clean up the Chu Yun Empire and teach you a lesson." Lan Yiqing, Quan Long, and the others were shocked and angry at first. After they calmed down, they were overjoyed. Everyone saw that Ji Tianqing had started the fight. If they joined forces to fight back and beat Ji Tianqing half to death and destroy his cultivation, it would be reasonable. They would not be punished. This was the best chance for them to take revenge and destroy Ji Tianqing. At this thought, Lan Yiqing, Quan Long, and the others all used their secret skills and attacked Ji Tianqing with all their might. Ji Tianqing was not afraid. He sneered disdainfully, "A bunch of trash. I said I would beat you up. Do I have to pick a time?" As he said that, he swung his fists again and used his ultimate move to attack the two young geniuses not far away. Star-shattering fist. The two young geniuses were Quan Long's fans. They had been following Quan Long and were very arrogant. They had been cursing him. However, the two of them were only at the 4th level of the primordial spirit realm. Before they could defend themselves, the two balls of dazzling golden fist radiance had already struck the two of them. Bam! Bam! With two dull thuds, the two young geniuses were sent flying. Blood spurted out of their orifices as they landed 1,000 feet away. The two young geniuses smashed into the edge of the square. After they landed, they fell unconscious and did not get up again. At this time, Lan Yiqing, Quan Long, and the 6 young geniuses all used their powerful ultimate moves to attack Ji Tianqing. Pillars of fire, ice blades, and sword radiance of various colors, as well as the radiance of spells that covered the sky, fell from the sky and enveloped Ji Tianqing. The area within a radius of 3,000 meters was instantly transformed into a colorful and dazzling world. Ji Tianqing's figure was about to be drowned by the various spells. At this critical moment, Ji Tianqing was fearless even though he was facing 8 opponents alone. Golden light flashed behind him and a pair of golden wings appeared. Chapter 1534. Bam! 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 At that moment, Lan Yiqing, Quan Long, and the others all sneered, as if they had succeeded. Cold, sinister smiles hung on the corners of their lips. The geniuses from the various countries had mixed feelings. Some felt sorry for Bam. Others were gloating. Most of them were certain that Ji Tianqing would not be able to withstand the combined attacks of the 8 geniuses. Even a genius at the 6th level of the primordial soul realm would be killed on the spot, let alone his 5th level of the primordial soul realm. Everyone was dumbfounded. They could not believe what they had seen. He saw that the square with a radius of 3,000 meters had become a fragmented ruin. Several huge deep pits had appeared, and the surroundings were covered with cracks like a spider web. Ji Tianqing stood above the crater, unscathed. He stepped into the sky, his body tall and straight. A pair of large golden wings bloomed behind his back, radiating a holy light under the sunlight. He was as majestic as a god. He looked down at Quan Long and the rest coldly. He was exuding a domineering aura. Everyone was stunned for a long time. When they came to their senses, they exclaimed. Lan Yiqing, Quan Long, and the rest were also shocked. Their hearts were beating wildly. How is this possible? He's unscathed. That damned bastard. In just 2 short months, he's become even stronger than before. We've broken ties with him. No matter what, we have to cripple him today. Otherwise, there will be no end to our troubles. The 8 geniuses communicated secretly. They exchanged looks and reached a consensus. Let's attack together. Let's end this quickly. Along with a few low shouts, the 8 geniuses attacked Ji Tianqing with all their might. A cold light flashed in Ji Tianqing's eyes. He waved his palms without hesitation. He unleashed all his strength and used his ultimate move. Heaven-capturing palm. Star-shattering fist. His left hand struck out a giant golden palm, while his right hand struck out a mountain-like golden fist radiance, blasting towards the young geniuses. Pang pang pang. Another series of muffled sounds burst out. The 4 young geniuses were sent flying by the giant golden palm and fist radiance. They spat out mouthfuls of blood as they were sent flying and smashed into the square. These 4 people were the same as the previous 5. They could not withstand a single blow from him and were severely injured on the spot. Such a powerful and invincible strength shocked all the geniuses of the various countries, causing them to reveal a look of deep shock. Following that, Ji Tianqing used the divine concealment step, maintaining his stealth state as he quietly rushed to the side of the 2 young geniuses. Bang bang! With a punch and a palm, he sent the 2 young geniuses flying and landed in a corner of the square. Their chests and abdomens caved in, and blood spurted out from their noses and mouths. After falling to the ground, they struggled a few times, but failed to get up. At this point, he had already defeated 11 young geniuses. Only Lan Yiqing and Quan Long were left. They were still using their ultimate techniques to fight against him. Only the 2 of you are left. Even though you have lost to me, I don't mind trampling on you one more time. Ji Tianqing shouted in a dignified tone, emitting a powerful aura. With that said, he was about to use his secret skill to crush Lan Yiqing and Quan Long. But at this moment, an angry roar like a great bell suddenly exploded in the air above the square. Stop! Everyone turned around. They saw more than a dozen powerful warriors walking out from the gate of the temple. The leader was the chief guardian. He flew over to the square with a gloomy expression. The 6 emissaries followed him and hurried to the square as well. At the end of the group was Lu Li, Jiang Ningxue, and several geniuses of the Empire of Thousand Snow. Clearly, the fight just now was so loud that the chief guardian and the emissaries were alerted. The square quieted down. Nobody said a word. They looked at Ji Tianqing and the chief guardian. Everyone secretly thought that Ji Tianqing was finished this time. The chief guardian would never let him go. Sure enough, the chief guardian looked at Ji Tianqing with a dignified expression and shouted in a deep voice, "Ji Tianqing, you guys actually flouted the laws of the vast heaven pagoda and fought outside the temple. How should you be punished?" Everyone originally thought that the chief guardian would definitely pin the crime of offending the majesty of the divine master on Ji Tianqing. But the chief guardian did not mention the divine master. He only said that he flouted the laws of the vast heaven pagoda. This made the geniuses of various countries somewhat puzzled. They faintly felt that something was not quite right. Ji Tianqing glanced at the chief guardian expressionlessly and said in a deep voice, "Chief guardian, I suggest you investigate the facts clearly before convicting." The chief guardian froze. Thinking of all the things that happened before, he was somewhat fearful. He frowned and said in a deep voice, "Okay, I enforce the law impartially. I never wronged anyone, but I won't be partial to anyone either. Now, you tell me, what in the world is going on here?" Ji Tianqing shot a glance at Lan Yiqing and Quan Long. He said in an indifferent tone, "A bunch of mad dogs that bite people indiscriminately. They blocked my path and even wanted to bully me by relying on numbers. Since that's the case, I can only teach them how to behave." The moment these words came out, the geniuses of various countries sucked in a cold breath one after another, revealing looks of shock and astonishment on their faces. My heavens, this guy is simply crazy to the point of defying the laws. Facing the chief guardian's questioning, he still didn't hurry to plead guilty or explain. He's actually so arrogant. Isn't this courting death? Too arrogant. This brat offended the chief guardian once in the first place. Now, he has such a vile attitude. He's completely hopeless. Wait and see. He's arrogant for a while now. There'll be time for him to cry right away. Lan Yiqing and Quan Long were scolded in public by Ji Tianqing. They were so ashamed that they trembled in anger. Quan Long stepped forward bravely and bowed to the chief guardian. He explained, "Chief guardian, a dozen of our disciples couldn't stand Ji Tianqing's ugly face and his shameless act of betraying our country. In order to protect the dignity of our country, we reprimanded him a little, hoping that he would repent and turn over a new leaf. But we didn't expect him to be so arrogant and audacious. He actually dared to fight outside the divine hall and seriously injured 11 of our countrymen until they fainted." Before Quan Long could finish his words, the chief guardian and the 6 divine messengers' faces changed. Their eyes were filled with deep shock. The chief guardian looked at Ji Tianqing with burning eyes and asked in disbelief, "Ji Tianqing, did you really start the fight first?" "That's right." Ji Tianqing did not bother to explain or lie. He answered expressionlessly. The glint in the chief guardian's eyes intensified. He asked in disbelief, "You fought a dozen of them alone?" "That's right." Ji Tianqing nodded with an indifferent expression. The chief guardian narrowed his eyes immediately. Perilous waves surged in his heart. This brat fought a dozen of them alone and came out unscathed. But he knocked 11 geniuses unconscious. Why didn't this Seat notice that he had such tyrannical strength previously? No wonder this brat has always been arrogant and haughty. No wonder he could cause the divine master to send down an oracle. With his strength at the 5th level essence spirit realm, he can reach such terrifying combat strength. He is indeed a rare genius. The few divine messengers exchanged glances and saw the shock in each other's eyes. Previously, they were still trying to figure out the meaning of the oracle. Now, they could finally confirm that the oracle was for Ji Tianqing. Quan Long saw that the chief guardian and divine messengers were silent. He said somewhat anxiously, "Chief guardian, Ji Tianqing turned a deaf ear to the vast heaven pagoda's laws and openly fought outside the divine hall." Chapter 1535. Before Quan Long could finish his words, the chief guardian bellowed, "Shut up. I have been in charge of the Haotian pagoda for hundreds of years. Do I need you to teach me? I dare not." Quan Long was pale with fright. He lowered his head and saluted at once. The chief guardian secretly communicated with the several messengers and then announced, "The mountain of investiture is a holy land of martial arts. It does not prohibit disciples from learning from each other. This is a personal grudge between the disciples of the Outcloud Empire and Ji Tianqing. The Haotian Pagoda will not interfere. However, you should not fight in the plaza in public. You will damage the dignity of the Holy Land. If there are any conflicts or disputes between disciples, please go to the arena to resolve them. All the disciples that have participated in the fight will be punished by going to the Cliff of Reflection for 10 days as a punishment." When the Great Protector announced the punishment, everyone was stunned. Lan Yiqing, Quan Long, and the others were so shocked that their eyes almost popped out of their sockets. No way! This is the punishment? The chief guardian has always enforced the law with an iron face. How can he be so gentle? These people have made such a big mess and they are only punished with 10 days of reflection. When did the chief guardian become so gentle? This is not right. Ji Tianqing started the fight. How can he be punished the same as the others? This is not a punishment. It is more like the chief guardian is siding with Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing has offended the chief guardian before. How can he be siding with Ji Tianqing? The young geniuses from all over the world were in an uproar. They were discussing with shock and confusion. Everyone could tell that the chief guardian not only did not punish Ji Tianqing according to the rules, but also downplayed the matter and punished him lightly. This was not normal. The geniuses from different countries were confused and could not understand. Only the chief guardian, Ji Tianqing, the 6 messengers and Lu Li understood the real reason. Standing at the edge of the plaza, Lu Li stared at Ji Tianqing with a gloomy look. Deep down in his eyes was surging hatred and naked jealousy. Lan Yiqing, Quan Long, and the others came back to their senses and hurriedly complained to the Great Guardian. "Great Guardian, it was clearly Ji Tianqing who caused trouble first. Great Guardian, please deal with this matter impartially and punish Ji Tianqing severely. Only then can we convince the masses. Ji Tianqing is vicious and merciless. He has injured 11 disciples. He must be severely punished. Chief Protector, Ji Tianqing offended the Divine Master during the worship ceremony before. Today, he once again blasphemed the Divine Master's dignity. He must be expelled from the Clear Sky Pagoda." Seeing that the 8 young geniuses had all opened their mouths to protest, the Great Guardian's face turned cold as he shouted in a dignified tone, "Shut up. I'm merciful, that's why I'm giving you a lighter punishment. If you continue to pester me without reason, I will punish you severely. As for offending the Divine Master's dignity, is that something you have the right to say? Open your eyes wide and take a good look at what the oracle on the stone tablet says." Hearing this, all the geniuses were stunned. Everyone turned their heads in unison and looked at the golden words on the stone tablet. Anyone who wasn't an idiot could understand what the Great Guardian meant. They could all guess that there was something more to the oracle. As expected, when they took a closer look at the oracle, their expressions all changed. Among the crowd, Perfect Dean was even more shocked. He exclaimed in disbelief. When he first entered the Mount of Investiture, he was struck by lightning. This is Ji Tianqing. He pointed out the answer in one sentence. Everyone was stunned. They were almost scared out of their wits. Lan Yiqing and Quan Long, in particular, were stupefied. They stared at the oracle in a daze. They were petrified. No way. This is impossible. I don't believe this is true. Ji Tianqing, that bastard, how could he get the oracle? Isn't it Lu Li who got the oracle? How come it's Ji Tianqing now? Wasn't Ji Tianqing kicked out of the temple in advance? How can he get the oracle to come? Crazy. We must be out of our minds. The nearly 100 geniuses from the 6 states were so shocked that they could not speak coherently. They did not know what to do. At this moment, the great guardian announced in a loud voice, Ji Tianqing paid his respects to the immortal master today. He is favored by the immortal master and the oracle is here. In the past 200 years, this is the first time the immortal master has sent down an oracle. This is not only an honor for Ji Tianqing, but also for the entire Haotian pagoda. It is worth celebrating. Because of this, I have shown you mercy and given you a lighter punishment. Hearing the great protector's words, everyone came to a sudden realization. No wonder the great guardian suddenly changed his attitude and sided with Ji Tianqing. A person that could be favored by the immortal master and get the oracle to come should be protected and valued. But no one could figure it out. Didn't Ji Tianqing offend the immortal master's dignity? How could he be favored by the immortal master? Of the dozens of young geniuses here, anyone could get the oracle except for Ji Tianqing. But the truth was right in front of them. The great guardian and the 6 messengers all thought so. Lu Li, who was in the corner of the plaza, also looked awful. He was filled with disappointment and shame. All signs pointed to the fact that the oracle was given to Ji Tianqing by the immortal master. The plaza was in a hubbub of voices. Everyone was discussing excitedly. They still could not accept this reality. The great guardian frowned. He waved his sleeve and ordered, "Let's go. This is the end of today's matter." Lan Yiqing and Kuang Long clenched their fists in anger and glared at Ji Tianqing. No matter how unwilling they were, they dared not to disobey the great guardian's order. They could only suppress their anger and humiliation, turned around and left. But at this moment, a cold voice sounded in the plaza. "Wait! Did I say you could leave?" The sudden cold shout shocked everyone, causing the entire square to quieten down. Everyone turned to Ji Tianqing in surprise and confusion. Lan Yiqing and Kuang Long also suppressed their anger. They stared at him with hatred and said in a deep voice, "Ji Tianqing, what do you want? The great guardian has announced the punishment. What else do you want?" Ji Tianqing looked down at the two and said with a straight face, "I will abide by the punishment announced by the great guardian. But we have not settled our personal grudge yet. Let's settle this once and for all in front of everyone." Lan Yiqing and Kuang Long's expressions changed. They were filled with killing intent. "Ji Tianqing, don't push us too far. Push us too far." Ji Tianqing curled his lips and said with contempt, "Just now, when you stopped me in such a threatening manner and humiliated me in turns, did you ever think of pushing me too far? I didn't want to pay attention to you clowns. But you kept pestering me. How can I let you go? I'm going to make you swallow all the filthy words you've used to insult me." Chapter 1536. An incomparably domineering voice spread throughout the entire plaza, shocking everyone's hearts. The various countries' geniuses all stared at Ji Tianqing, revealing thick shock. Their heartbeats and blood flow accelerated. This guy. Really daring to say it. This is the true lawlessness. Either kneel down yourselves, or I'll beat you all to kneel. Too domineering. This is the unyielding character and domineering aura that a peerless genius should have. Yeah, even the divine master favored him and gave him an oracle. How can such a peerless genius be humiliated? Don't you guys forget, Ji Tianqing is the Outcloud Empire's #1 genius to begin with. He defeated those two people long ago. Many geniuses discussed animatedly, staring fixedly at Lan Yiqing and Kuang Long, wanting to see how they would wrap things up. Lan Yiqing and Kuang Long nearly exploded in anger. Their faces alternated between green and white, and their hands and feet were trembling. The two were also martial Dao geniuses with extraordinary backgrounds. They had always been proud and arrogant. They had never suffered such humiliation in their lives. Kuang Long was in a violent rage. His eyes flickered with scarlet killing intent as he stared fixedly at Ji Tianqing. His voice was low and hoarse as he shouted, "Ji Tianqing. You bastard, even if I, Quan Long, die in battle, I absolutely won't submit to you. So what if you obtain the oracle? In my eyes, you'll always be a petty person who fawns on the powerful. In contrast, Lan Yiqing was still considered calm, restraining her anger and killing intent. She raised her head to look at the Chief Protector and said in a deep voice, Chief Protector, you saw it. Ji Tianqing ignored your decision and was overbearing. The Chief Protector furrowed his brows and said expressionlessly, this seat already said that the vast heaven pagoda won't interfere in the personal grudges between disciples. However, this seat and the 6 divine envoys are present. We can be the witnesses and allow you guys to duel. But no lives can be lost. 2 simple sentences expressed the vast heaven pagoda's attitude. Lan Yiqing was in complete despair. Counting on the Chief Protector to resolve the situation clearly could not be counted on. After all, a genius who obtained the oracle would receive the Divine Master's favor and would definitely become a peerless powerhouse in the future. Compared to Ji Tianqing, she and Quan Long appeared insignificant. It was already extremely benevolent of the Great Guardian to protect their lives. The hope in Lan Yiqing's eyes faded bit by bit, eventually turning into endless coldness and killing intent. She didn't regret her previous actions. She only regretted that she didn't use the Lan family's power to kill Ji Tianqing back in the Chu Yun Empire. Quan Long took the lead and flew into the air, standing 1,000 feet away from Ji Tianqing, staring at him with a murderous look on his face. There was a bronze chain wrapped around his body, and his entire body was emitting a dark red light, releasing a powerful aura. Ji Tianqing. Last time, I was careless and lost to you. Today. He glared at Ji Tianqing and growled coldly. But Ji Tianqing ignored him. He pointed a finger at Lan Yiqing and said indifferently, come at me together. I don't want to waste time. As soon as he said this, everyone was shocked. How arrogant and domineering. Quan Long was completely ignored. This unparalleled humiliation almost made him vomit blood. Lan Yiqing was also angered by Ji Tianqing's disdainful attitude. You damned bastard. You're too arrogant. Today, I'll avenge myself. As she spoke, a blue light flashed in her palm, and a crystal-clear blue sword appeared. It was the Extreme Ice Sword. Stars in the sky. She growled coldly. Her hands formed a mysterious seal, and she controlled the Extreme Ice Sword to shoot out 360 rays of icy blue sword radiance towards Ji Tianqing. The sword radiance covered the sky, as dazzling as the stars in the sky. The terrifying sword radiance exuded an extremely cold aura, freezing everything within a radius of 20,000 feet. In an instant, Ji Tianqing's body was surrounded by more than 300 rays of sword radiance. He didn't take out any weapon, nor did he use his primordial spirit Dharma power. He only used his fists to shoot out 2 rays of dark golden fist radiance. Star-shattering fist. He used all of his power, and the fist radiance was as powerful as a mountain. Kaboom! The icy blue sword radiance that covered the sky was smashed into countless ice shards by the fists. At this moment, Quan Long had arrived. He waved the ancient bronze chain and slashed out 19 blood-red giant swords, slashing towards Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing waved his hands again, and slapped at the sword radiance. Heaven-seizing palm. The 2 giant golden palms slammed into the blood-red sword, causing 2 loud bangs to ring out. The dozen blood-red giant swords were all shattered. Lan Yiqing and Quan Long's full-powered attacks were easily neutralized by Ji Tianqing. Both of them were shocked, and their eyes were filled with worry. The geniuses and oracles of God from various countries all retreated to the edge of the square, watching the battle calmly. At this moment, Ji Tianqing launched his counterattack. He suddenly used the stealth step and disappeared into the sky. The next moment, he appeared beside Quan Long and punched him in the face. Crack! Quan Long didn't expect this, and he couldn't dodge at all. The left side of his face caved in on the spot. His bones were shattered, and his flesh was badly mangled. Under the intense pain, he waved his bronze chain crazily and released 2 blood-red giant dragons to attack Ji Tianqing. However, Ji Tianqing's figure instantly disappeared, dodging the blood dragon's attack. The 2 blood-red dragons flew across the square, and were about to hit the temple. At this critical moment, the great guardian waved his right hand and grabbed the 2 blood-red giant dragons, crushing them. The 2 destructive giant dragons were as weak as earthworms in front of him. At this moment, Ji Tianqing dodged the attacks of Quan Long and Lan Yiqing and appeared on Quan Long's right side like a ghost. Bang! He punched the right side of Quan Long's face again. The right side of Quan Long's face was smashed, and blood and broken bones spurted out. He was completely unrecognizable. Quan Long had been the one who yelled the loudest, calling Ji Tianqing a traitor, a dog, and shameless. But now, Ji Tianqing had purposely smashed his entire face as punishment for his foul mouth. Quan Long flew into a rage after suffering such heavy injuries. He immediately summoned his primordial spirit and used his ultimate skill to attack Ji Tianqing. Ji Tianqing, on the other hand, turned invisible and dodged the attack. He appeared and disappeared like a ghost and charged towards Lan Yiqing. Before Lan Yiqing could react, he swept his leg out and hit her knees. With a cracking sound, her legs were broken on the spot, and she let out a cry of pain. Then, Ji Tianqing's figure flashed in and out of the square. Every time he appeared, he was beside Lan Yiqing or Quan Long, and he used his fists and feet to injure them. Lan Yiqing and Quan Long were beaten to a pulp. Countless bones and joints were broken, and their bodies were covered in blood. Even if they used their primordial spirit dharma forms and domain mystic arts, they couldn't do anything to Ji Tianqing. Back in the ranking battle, Ji Tianqing was only at the 4th level of the primordial spirit realm. Lan Yiqing could fight him for a while before losing. Chapter 1537. After a short while, the battle on the square stopped. Lan Yiqing and Quan Long were both covered in wounds. Their tattered clothes were dyed red with blood, and they looked particularly miserable. Quan Long was beyond recognition. His body was almost destroyed, but he still stood stubbornly on the ruins and did not fall. Lan Yiqing's knees and ankles were broken. He could not stand at all. He could only kneel on one knee with the extreme ice sword in his hands. Both of them were panting as they tried their best to suppress their injuries. They could no longer fight back. If they continued fighting, their bodies would definitely be destroyed. Ji Tianqing had beaten the 2 of them to such a state with absolute dominance, but he was not injured at all. He stood 100 steps away from the 2 of them. His face was cold as he stared at them indifferently. Kneel. Apologize. A cold and majestic voice rang out above the square. It shook Lan Yiqing and Quan Long's hearts. Both of them shuddered. They were furious. Lan Yiqing's eyes looked like they were about to spit fire. The hearts of the geniuses from all over the world were also in their throats. Everyone stared at Lan Yiqing and Quan Long, wondering what they would do. Refuse to admit their mistakes and apologize? Then they would definitely end up in a miserable state. If they really did kneel and apologize, their reputation would be ruined. They would never be able to hold their heads high again. If they stayed on Mount God Seal, they would always be humiliated and ridiculed by others. Only the Great Guardian and the 6 divine envoys could resolve this situation. However, the Great Guardian had already stated that he would not interfere with their personal grudge with Ji Tianqing. Now, they could only solve this problem themselves. Ji Tianqing, don't even think about making me apologize. Kill me if you have the guts. Quan Long straightened his neck and raised his mangled head as he let out a furious roar. Lan Yiqing held the extreme ice sword in both hands. His face was extremely cold. He stared sharply at Ji Tianqing and said through gritted teeth, "You want me to apologize? Over my dead body? Both of them were very determined. They would rather die than kneel and apologize. Ji Tianqing had long expected this. He sneered, "You're really stubborn." As soon as he finished speaking, a majestic primordial spirit pressure gushed out from his body and pressed down on Quan Long and Lan Yiqing. An invisible, enormous pressure descended from the sky like a towering mountain. Instantly, the two of them bent their backs and lowered their heads. Lan Yiqing was originally kneeling on one knee, holding the extreme ice sword with both hands. At this moment, she was forced to kneel on the ground. Her body was bent like a bow, and her head was almost touching the ground. Mad Dragon was originally standing, but at this moment, he also bowed deeply, as if he was bowing to Ji Tianqing. Cracking noises could be heard from all the bones in his body, as if they were about to break. However, he was still stubbornly holding on, desperately resisting the suppressive power, unwilling to kneel no matter what. Seeing this, Ji Tianqing waved his hands and formed a mysterious seal, executing a secret technique. Dharma body of heaven and earth. As the seal was formed, the power of heaven and earth within 1,000 miles gathered on his body. Instantly, his aura skyrocketed, and his entire person became more sacred and majestic. He was as majestic as a mountain, and as majestic as a god. Kneel! He roared angrily, releasing an even more powerful suppressive power, which slammed toward Lan Yiqing and Mad Dragon. Mad Dragon was suddenly hit hard and could no longer hold on. His legs were instantly shattered, and he knelt on the ground with a plop. Two deep depressions appeared on the ground that was filled with rubble as he knelt, almost swallowing his two legs. Under the terrifying suppressive power, his spine kept bending, and his head slowly reached toward the ground. Then, with a muffled bang, his entire head was smashed into the ground, creating a crater. Lan Yiqing's fate was the same. She knelt on the ground, half of her body buried in the rubble. Her head was also smashed into the ground, buried in dust. No matter how unyielding and angry they were forced to kneel and kowtow to Ji Tianqing to apologize. Their reputations were ruined just like that. Their pride and dignity as prodigies were also trampled to the point of being worthless. The prodigies of the 6 nations all felt a chill run down their spines as they looked at Ji Tianqing with fear and trepidation. This guy, what a ruthless method. He didn't kill Lan Yiqing and Mad Dragon. But this kind of humiliation was even more terrifying than killing them. From now on, they must never offend Ji Tianqing. Otherwise, they would suffer a fate worse than death. With that in mind, the young prodigies who had mocked Ji Tianqing before couldn't help but shrink their necks, and their hearts were filled with worry. At this moment, Ji Tianqing looked down at Lan Yiqing and Mad Dragon. He said in an indifferent voice, "There is no source of fortune or disaster. Those who humiliate others are bound to humiliate themselves. Don't provoke me in the future." As his voice fell, he retracted his invisible suppressive power. The sky within a radius of 10,000 feet was instantly unsealed. Lan Yiqing and Mad Dragon had regained their freedom. They hurriedly struggled out of the rubble and fled in a sorry state. The unparalleled humiliation and the discussions of the prodigies of the 6 nations made them want to die. They didn't dare to stay for even a moment longer. They didn't even dare to look at anyone. They just wanted to leave as soon as possible and escape from everyone's sight. Their leg bones were already shattered. With the support of their magic power, they staggered out of the plaza and returned to Chu Yun Palace in a daze. The prodigies of the various nations looked at their sorry figures as they left, and a wave of whispers and discussions erupted. This matter was over. The great guardian waved his hand and ordered 20 golden-armored guards to drag away the unconscious prodigies of the Chu Yun Empire and bring them back to Chu Yun Palace to recuperate. Ji Tianqing didn't stay any longer. He turned around and was about to leave the plaza. However, right at this moment, a vigorous voice suddenly sounded in the square. "Wait!" The sudden cold voice made the prodigies of the various nations quiet down. Even the great guardian and the 6 divine envoys who were about to leave stopped when they heard the voice. A tall man in a dark green robe walked out of the crowd of the great Qian Empire. Under everyone's gaze, he stepped into the air and caught up to Ji Tianqing. He stood 100 steps away from him. This man had sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes. His face was upright and his body was tall and straight. He exuded a powerful aura, and there was a trace of arrogance between his brows. When the prodigies of the various nations saw his face, they immediately revealed a puzzled expression and began to whisper to each other. Isn't that the number 1 prodigy of the great Qian Empire, Qian Feiyang? What does he want to do? He actually stopped Ji Tianqing. Could it be that he wants to teach Ji Tianqing a lesson? That's impossible, right? Qian Feiyang is from the great Qian Empire. How could he help someone from the Chuyuan Empire? Chapter 1538. Everyone had a premonition that Qian Feiyang had a motive for standing up now. The geniuses who were about to leave all returned to the square and watched. Even the chief enforcer and the 6 god envoys were puzzled. They didn't know what Qian Feiyang wanted to do. Ji Tianqing glanced at Qian Feiyang and said indifferently, "What's the matter?" Qian Feiyang stared at him, his body emitting an arrogant aura. He didn't seem to be at a disadvantage. Ji Tianqing, many people think that you've received the God Master's favor and brought about the oracle. From the first sentence of the oracle, it does make some sense. But I don't believe it, and I can't accept this result. It's not just me, but the geniuses of the other countries also don't believe it. Qian Feiyang's expression was arrogant, and his tone was full of energy. Following his words, the young geniuses of the other countries started to discuss. Indeed, nearly half of the geniuses didn't believe that the oracle was for Ji Tianqing, and they all agreed with Qian Feiyang. Ji Tianqing frowned and looked at him coldly. It doesn't matter whether you believe it or not. No, it's very important. Qian Feiyang shook his head and sneered. He said in a playful tone, in terms of martial talent, you may not be very strong. In terms of strength, you're not even in the top 5, and you're even weaker than me. Including me, there are at least 5 geniuses more qualified than you to receive the oracle. So. Ji Tianqing raised his eyebrows, his tone still indifferent. Qian Feiyang's body emitted a strong fighting spirit. He stared at him and said word by word, "So, I want to challenge you in front of everyone. I just want everyone to see the truth. The God Master's oracle was definitely not for you. I'm more qualified than you to receive the God Master's favor." His thunderous voice echoed in the square, filled with a domineering and confident aura. The geniuses of the other countries immediately understood Qian Feiyang's goal. They all burst into discussion and cheered. Many people were cheering for him. Ji Tianqing furrowed his brows and coldly looked at Qian Feiyang. He was thinking, this Qian Feiyang is a scheming bastard. He openly challenged me in front of everyone, making it difficult for me to refuse. If he defeats me in front of everyone, not only will he diminish my prestige, but also raise his reputation. Previously, Jiu had given him a name list that recorded the information of the 6 nations' geniuses. He knew that Qian Feiyang was the great's number 1 genius. This person had strength at the 6th firmament-essence soul realm. He was ranked 4th among the geniuses of the 6 states, second only to Jiang Ningxue. Ji Tianqing thought to himself, ever since I entered Mount God Seal, I haven't fought in front of anyone. Although I injured Lan Yiqing, Quanlong, and the others, and shocked the geniuses of the other countries with the power of the oracle. But that's not enough. I'm the Outcloud Empire's number 1 genius. It's normal for me to defeat Lan Yiqing and Quanlong. Since Qian Feiyang challenged me, I'll use this opportunity to crush him in front of everyone. He wants to trample on my prestige. I'll use him as a stepping stone to intimidate the other geniuses. Thinking of this, Ji Tianqing made up his mind. At this moment, Qian Feiyang saw him frowning and not saying anything. Qian Feiyang sneered contemptuously. Ji Tianqing, you're so quiet. Don't tell me you're rejecting my challenge. This isn't a personal grudge. It's just a friendly spar. We can go to the arena and ask the divine envoys to supervise the battle. The great guardian frowned and shouted in a stern voice, Qian Feiyang. I just announced the result. The divine master gave the divine oracle to Ji Tianqing. He's the son of the divine oracle. Ji Tianqing fought the Outcloud Empire's disciples alone and defeated them all. That's enough to prove his strength. Moreover, he just fought and used up a lot of his spiritual power. How can you take advantage of him and challenge him now? Although the Great Guardian's words were fair and impartial, the Great Guardian's words were not biased. However, when many geniuses heard this, they felt that the head enforcer was biased towards Ji Tianqing, and felt sour in their hearts. Qian Feiyang saluted the Great Guardian and smiled. Great Guardian, the battle just now seemed wonderful and shocking. But it was actually very ordinary. I can defeat the Outcloud Empire's trash alone. He then looked at Ji Tianqing and said in a mocking tone, since you used up a lot of your spiritual power and don't dare to accept the challenge, we'll do it another day. I'll give you 3 days to recuperate. 3 days later, we'll meet on the arena. Before he could finish, Ji Tianqing interrupted him and said in a low voice, there's no need for another day. Let's do it now, right here. Hearing that Shen Tian agreed on the spot, Qian Feiyang sneered. The young geniuses from various countries also cheered excitedly, their faces full of anticipation. To the crowd, Ji Tianqing's bullying of the Outcloud Empire's geniuses seemed arrogant and domineering. But it wasn't that difficult. Only by fighting with the top geniuses could one's true strength be shown. It was more exciting and more enjoyable. The Great Guardian was stunned. He frowned and looked at Ji Tianqing. He secretly transmitted his voice, Ji Tianqing, don't try to be brave. If you lose, it will affect my and the oracle's prestige. Ji Tianqing transmitted his voice back. He said with certainty, a mere Qian Feiyang is nothing to worry about. If he wants to use me as a stepping stone, he's destined to break his leg. Seeing that he was so confident, the Great Guardian didn't say anything else. Swoosh! He waved his palms and shot out a 7-colored light screen that covered the sky and covered half of the square. A saint-level defensive array was immediately formed, protecting the square in front of the palace. The Great Guardian, the 6 oracles, and the geniuses from various countries all retreated outside the array, leaving only Ji Tianqing and Qian Feiyang in the square. No matter how they fought, they wouldn't destroy the buildings outside the array, nor would they hurt the people outside. The two stood in the ruined square, staring at each other coldly, secretly accumulating their aura and magic power. Qian Feiyang said contemptuously, what a pity. You just got the oracle. Before you can enjoy the glory of the oracle, you're going to be stepped on by me. I want everyone to see that I'm more outstanding than the oracle's son. From now on, the glory and resources that should have belonged to you will belong to me. Ji Tianqing looked at him expressionlessly. He wasn't angry at all. He said indifferently, your plan is good, but it's destined to fail. You'll become another clown. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.